The corruption of Horus Lupercal began not with grand declarations or obvious betrayals, but with whispers in the dark corners of Davin's moon. The Warmaster, greatest of the Emperor's sons and commander of the Luna Wolves Legion, had fallen to wounds inflicted by the demon-possessed weapon of Yugen Temba during the suppression of the Davin rebellion. As his life ebbed away in the Medike Bay of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, his Gene sons faced an impossible choice between the cold certainty of Imperial science and the desperate promises of Davin's warrior lodges. The lodges themselves represented a cancer that had spread throughout several legions, secret societies that claimed brotherhood transcended the rigid hierarchies of the Great Crusade. These organizations, seemingly innocent gatherings of warriors sharing oaths and rituals, had been infiltrated and corrupted by the ruinous powers. When First Captain Ezekiel Abaddon and the Mournival agreed to allow the Davinite priestess Akshub to perform her healing ritual upon their dying Primarch, they unknowingly opened the door to humanity's greatest catastrophe. Within the stolen Delphos, an ancient Imperial Fane ship converted into a makeshift temple, Horus experienced visions that would reshape the galaxy's destiny. The Chaos Gods, working through their mortal agents, showed him carefully crafted lies about the Emperor's true nature and intentions. They revealed the Imperial truth as the greatest falsehood ever perpetrated, exposing the Emperor not as humanity's protector, but as a would-be god who planned to discard his sons once their usefulness ended. The visions showed Horus a future where he and his brothers were forgotten, their achievements credited to the Emperor alone while they faded into obscurity. When Horus emerged from the ritual chamber, he appeared healed and whole, but something fundamental had changed within the Warmaster's soul. The corruption worked slowly at first, manifesting as increased cynicism toward the imperial bureaucracy and growing resentment of the Emperor's withdrawal from the Great Crusade to pursue his mysterious projects on Terra. Horus began to question orders more frequently, to delay compliance actions that seemed unnecessarily brutal, and to speak privately with his brother Primarchs about their shared concerns regarding the Imperium's direction. The warrior lodges provided the perfect vehicle for spreading this corruption throughout the legions. What had begun as informal gatherings became recruitment grounds for heretical thinking, places where Astartes could voice doubts about their purpose and destiny without fear of censure from their officers. Lodge brothers from different legions carried these seeds of rebellion back to their own forces, creating networks of potential traitors that spanned multiple worlds and fleets. Horus's first overt act of rebellion came during the Oreshan Technocracy Compliance, where he deliberately prolonged the campaign to allow his corrupted followers more time to spread their influence. The Warmaster began making strategic decisions that served his own agenda rather than the Imperium's interests, positioning loyal elements of his forces in vulnerable positions while protecting those who had embraced the Lodge philosophy. His charisma and reputation as the Emperor's chosen son made these actions appear as tactical necessities rather than deliberate betrayals. The corruption accelerated when Horus made contact with Lorgar Aurelian, Primarch of the Word-Bearers Legion. Lorgar had spent decades secretly worshipping the Chaos Gods after his humiliation at Monarchia, where the Emperor had ordered the Ultramarines to destroy the Word-Bearers' perfect city as punishment for their religious devotion. The two Primarchs found common ground in their resentment toward their father, and Lorgar became instrumental in Horus's complete fall to chaos. Through carefully orchestrated meetings disguised as routine strategic conferences, Lorgar introduced Horus to the deeper mysteries of chaos worship and the true scope of what rebellion against the Emperor might achieve. The Isstvan system became the stage for Horus's first major act of open rebellion. This cluster of worlds in the Segmentum Solar had declared independence from imperial rule, their governors citing excessive taxation and brutal enforcement of imperial law as justification for their secession. Under normal circumstances, such rebellions warranted swift and decisive action, but Horus saw an opportunity to test his theories about loyalty and to begin the systematic purge of elements within his own forces who might oppose his eventual rebellion. The Isstvan III campaign began as what appeared to be a standard compliance action. Horus deployed elements of 4 legions to the system, his own Luna Wolves, the Emperor's children under Fulgrim, the Death Guard commanded by Mortarion, and the World Eaters led by Angron. Each of these Primarchs had been carefully cultivated by Horus and Lorgar, their own grievances against the Emperor exploited, and their loyalty gradually turned toward the Warmaster. However, within each legion remained significant numbers of Astartes, whose devotion to the Emperor and the Imperial truth remained unshakable. The virus bombing of Isstvan III represented the point of no return for Horus's rebellion. Rather than conduct a conventional planetary assault, the Warmaster ordered the deployment of Life Eater virus bombs across the world's surface. These weapons of mass destruction had been created during the Dark Age of technology and were considered so horrific that their use required direct authorization from the Emperor himself. The virus consumed all organic matter it contacted, reducing entire populations to sludge before igniting the planet's atmosphere in a massive firestorm. The true horror of Isstvan III lay not in the weapons' use against the rebellious population, but in Horus's deliberate targeting of loyalist elements within his own forces. The Warmaster had carefully identified those Astartes most likely to oppose his rebellion and deployed them to the planet's surface under the pretense of establishing forward operating bases and securing strategic locations. Captains like Saul Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children, Nathaniel Garrow of the Death Guard, and Tarik Torgadon of the Luna Wolves found themselves trapped on a world about to be consumed by viral death. The systematic nature of this purge revealed the depth of planning behind Horus's rebellion. Intelligence networks within each legion had spent months identifying potential loyalists, creating detailed lists of officers and battle brothers whose devotion to the Emperor remained absolute. These lists were cross-referenced with deployment schedules and tactical assignments to ensure that the maximum number of loyalists would be present on Isstvan III when the virus bombs fell. Some loyalists managed to escape the initial viral bombardment through luck, skill, or advance warning from sympathetic brothers who had not yet fully embraced the Lodge philosophy. These survivors found themselves fighting a desperate battle for survival against both the hostile environment and the traitor forces sent to eliminate any who had escaped the virus. The siege of the Coral City became a microcosm of the larger civil war to come, with loyalist Astartes making their final stand against overwhelming odds, while their own Primarchs orchestrated their destruction from orbit. News of the Isstvan III atrocity reached Terra through a handful of survivors who managed to escape the system before Horus could complete his purge. Nathaniel Garrow's arrival aboard the frigate Eisenstein brought the first concrete evidence of the Warmaster's treachery to the Imperial Palace. The Death Guard battle captain's testimony, supported by similar accounts from other survivors, painted a picture of betrayal so comprehensive and shocking that many within the Imperial hierarchy initially refused to believe it. The Emperor's response to reports of Horus's rebellion demonstrated both the magnitude of the threat and the limitations of Imperial intelligence networks. Despite commanding the most extensive surveillance apparatus in human history, the Master of Mankind had failed to detect the corruption spreading through his most trusted sons. The warrior lodges had operated beneath the notice of Imperial observers, their activities dismissed as harmless fraternal organizations rather than recognized as vehicles for sedition. The decision to dispatch 7 legions to bring Horus to account reflected both the Emperor's understanding of the threat's severity and his continued faith in the loyalty of his remaining sons. The Iron Hands under Ferrus Manus, the Salamanders led by Vulcan, and the Raven Guard commanded by Corax received orders to join the expedition as the primary assault force. These 3 legions were chosen for their proven loyalty and their Primarch's close relationships with the Emperor, making them ideal candidates to confront their fallen brother. Supporting this primary force, 4 additional legions received deployment orders to the Isstvan system. The Iron Warriors under Perdurabo, the Night Lords commanded by Conrad Kurz, the Word Bearers led by Lorgar, and the Alpha Legion under Alfarius were designated as the second wave, tasked with providing reinforcement and ensuring that none of Horus's forces could escape Imperial justice. The selection of these particular legions would later prove to be one of the Emperor's greatest tactical errors, as each had already been corrupted by chaos or harbored deep resentments against the imperial system. The strategic importance of the Isstvan system extended beyond its role as the site of Horus's first major rebellion. Located within the Segmentum Solar, the system occupied a crucial position along several major warp routes that connected the core imperial worlds with the expanding frontier territories. Control of Isstvan would provide Horus with a secure base of operations within striking distance of Terra itself, while denying the Imperium access to vital supply lines that supported dozens of ongoing compliance campaigns. Horus understood that his rebellion required more than military victories to succeed. It needed legitimacy in the eyes of those imperial citizens and military personnel who had not yet chosen sides. By positioning himself as a defender of the Great Crusade's original ideals against the Emperor's supposed betrayal of those principles, the Warmaster could present his rebellion as a righteous cause rather than mere ambition. The Isstvan system became the symbol of this narrative, a place where loyal servants of humanity would make their stand against tyranny and deception. The consolidation of power among the traitor Primarchs required careful manipulation of their individual grievances and ambitions. Fulgrim's perfectionist nature made him susceptible to promises of transcendence beyond mortal limitations, while Mortarian's hatred of psychers and distrust of the Emperor's psychic nature provided leverage for corruption. Angron's rage against the Emperor for preventing him from dying alongside his gladiator brothers on New Syria created a wellspring of resentment that Horus could exploit, while Perdurabo's bitterness over his legion's thankless siege warfare assignments made him receptive to promises of recognition and glory. Each traitor Primarch brought unique capabilities to Horus's rebellion that would prove crucial in the campaigns to come. The Emperor's children provided expertise in rapid assault tactics and the corruption of imperial institutions, while the Death Guard offered resilience and biological warfare capabilities that complemented their growing devotion to Nurgle. The World Eaters brought unmatched ferocity in close combat, their berserker implants making them ideal shock troops for the most desperate battles. The Iron Warriors contributed siege warfare expertise and logistical capabilities that would prove essential for sustained campaigns against fortified imperial positions. The Word-Bearers served as the rebellion's spiritual core, their decades of secret chaos worship providing the theological framework that transformed simple military rebellion into religious crusade. Lorgar's chaplains spread throughout the traitor forces, conducting rituals and ceremonies that bound the rebels ever more tightly to their dark patrons, while providing justification for increasingly extreme actions. The Alpha Legion's intelligence networks and infiltration capabilities allowed Horus to maintain awareness of imperial responses and to sow confusion within loyalist ranks through misinformation and sabotage operations. As reports of the Isstvan III massacre spread throughout imperial space, the true scope of Horus's rebellion began to emerge. Worlds that had seemed secure suddenly declared for the Warmaster, their governors revealing themselves as longtime Lodge members or chaos cultists. Imperial army regiments turned on their loyalist comrades, while Mechanicum Forge worlds split along ideological lines between those who supported the Emperor and those who saw opportunity in the rebellion's promise of unrestricted technological development. The Imperial Palace erupted into controlled chaos as the full implications of Nathaniel Garrow's testimony became clear to the Emperor's inner circle. The Warmaster's rebellion represented more than military insurrection. It threatened the very foundations of the Imperium and the future of humanity itself. Within hours of confirming the reports from Isstvan III, the Emperor had authorized the largest punitive expedition in the Great Crusade's history. The selection of Ferrus Manus to lead this expedition reflected both strategic necessity and personal trust. The Primarch of the Iron Hands had maintained an unblemished record of loyalty throughout the Great Crusade, his methodical approach to warfare and absolute devotion to imperial doctrine making him an ideal choice to confront the fallen Warmaster. Ferrus possessed intimate knowledge of Horus's tactical preferences from their years of brotherhood, having fought alongside the Luna Wolves in dozens of campaigns across the galaxy. More importantly, his relationship with Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children provided crucial intelligence about the corruption spreading through the traitor legions. The Iron Hands themselves brought unique capabilities to the expedition that would prove essential in the battles ahead. Their extensive use of augmetic implants and close ties to the Mechanicum provided superior logistical support and technical expertise compared to other legions. The clan-based structure of the 10th Legion ensured rapid deployment capabilities, as each clan company operated with considerable autonomy and could function independently during extended campaigns. Ferrus had spent decades perfecting combined arms tactics that integrated Legion forces with Mechanicum support elements, creating a military machine capable of sustained operations against even the most formidable opponents. The Primarch's famous living metal hands, a gift from the Great Worm of Medusa, had become symbols of his legion's philosophy of strength through technology. These necrodermis appendages could reshape themselves into any tool or weapon required, allowing Ferrus to personally demonstrate the superiority of augmented flesh over weak human limitations. His warriors followed this example, replacing organic limbs and organs with mechanical alternatives that enhanced their combat effectiveness and reduced their vulnerability to conventional weapons. This philosophy would serve them well against traitors who had embraced the corrupting gifts of chaos. Vulcan of the Salamanders received his deployment orders while overseeing the construction of new fortifications on the world of Nocturne. The Primarch's reaction to news of Horus's betrayal demonstrated the deep personal bonds that had existed between the Primarchs before corruption tore them apart. Vulcan had considered Horus not merely a brother, but a close friend, their shared experiences during the Great Crusade creating ties that transcended mere military cooperation. The revelation that the Warmaster had orchestrated the murder of his own sons struck Vulcan as the ultimate violation of the bonds that held the Imperium together. The 18th Legion brought their own distinctive strengths to the expedition, particularly their expertise in siege warfare and close-quarters combat. The Salamanders' homeworld of Nocturne had forged them into masters of fighting in extreme environments, their gene seed adaptations allowing them to operate effectively in conditions that would cripple other legions. Their tradition of craftsmanship meant that every battle brother maintained his own weapons and equipment to standards that exceeded even the Mechanicum's specifications. The Legion's flamers and melta weapons would prove particularly effective against the corrupted forces that Horus had gathered under his banner. Vulcan's personal philosophy of protecting human life whenever possible had earned his Legion a reputation for restraint unusual among the Astartes. The Salamanders routinely went to extraordinary lengths to minimize civilian casualties during compliance actions, often accepting higher losses among their own ranks to preserve innocent lives. This approach had sometimes drawn criticism from other Primarchs who viewed such concerns as inefficient, but Vulcan maintained that the Imperium's ultimate purpose was to serve humanity rather than dominate it. The Isstvan expedition would test these principles as never before, forcing the Salamanders to confront enemies who had abandoned all pretense of serving human interests. Corax of the Raven Guard brought a different perspective to the expedition's leadership council, his experiences during the liberation of Deliverance having shaped his understanding of tyranny and resistance. The Primarch had spent his youth fighting against the tech barbarian overlords who had enslaved his people, learning lessons about guerrilla warfare and popular uprising that few other Imperial commanders could match. His tactical doctrine emphasized speed, stealth, and precise application of force to achieve maximum effect with minimal resources. The 19th Legion's expertise in reconnaissance and infiltration would provide the expedition with intelligence capabilities essential for understanding the true scope of Horus's rebellion. The Raven Guard's gene seed mutations had gifted them with enhanced eyesight and pale skin that made them appear almost spectral in certain lighting conditions. These adaptations, combined with their preference for black armor and stealth tactics, had earned them a reputation as the Emperor's shadows. Corax had cultivated this image deliberately, understanding that fear could be as effective a weapon as bolt or fire when properly employed. His warriors specialized in striking from unexpected directions, eliminating key targets before melting back into the darkness to prepare for their next assault. The Primarch's personal weapon, a pair of lightning claws known as the Raven's Talons, embodied his legion's approach to warfare. These master-crafted weapons could slice through even Terminator armor with ease, their disruption fields capable of bypassing almost any defensive system. Corax had forged them himself in the depths of Deliverance, incorporating rare materials and archaeotech components that made them unique among the Primarch's personal arsenals. The sight of their crackling energy fields had become synonymous with swift death for the enemies of the Imperium. The designation of 4 additional legions as the expedition's second wave reflected the Emperor's understanding that Horus's rebellion might require overwhelming force to suppress. The Iron Warriors under Perturabo received orders to deploy their siege specialists and heavy equipment to support the primary assault force. The 4th Legion's reputation for reducing fortified positions made them essential for any campaign that might involve assaulting the traitor strongholds that Horus was undoubtedly constructing throughout the Isstvan system. Perturabo's bitter relationship with his brothers had long been a source of tension within the imperial hierarchy, but his military capabilities remained unquestioned. The Iron Warriors had conducted more siege operations than any other legion, their methodical approach to fortress warfare having broken dozens of seemingly impregnable defenses. The Primarch himself possessed an intuitive understanding of structural engineering that bordered on the supernatural, allowing him to identify weak points in enemy fortifications that other commanders would miss entirely. His warriors shared this expertise, their long experience in siege warfare having taught them to think like both attackers and defenders simultaneously. The Night Lords under Conrad Kurz brought terror tactics and psychological warfare capabilities that complemented the expedition's more conventional forces. The 8th Legion's reputation for extreme brutality had made them effective tools for suppressing rebellions, their mere presence often sufficient to convince potential insurgents to abandon their plans. Kurz's precognitive abilities provided strategic advantages that few other Primarchs could match, his visions of possible futures allowing him to anticipate enemy movements and prepare appropriate countermeasures. The Primarch's increasingly erratic behavior had concerned his brothers for decades, but his effectiveness in combat remained undeniable. The Night Lords' preference for fighting in darkness and their use of fear as a weapon made them ideal for operations against demoralized enemies. Their armor incorporated skull motifs and other intimidating imagery designed to maximize psychological impact, while their tactical doctrines emphasized the importance of breaking enemy morale before engaging in direct combat. The expedition's planners believed that these capabilities would prove essential when confronting traitors who had abandoned their oaths to the Emperor. Lorgar of the Word-Bearers received his deployment orders while conducting religious ceremonies on the world of Kalkus, his apparent devotion to imperial doctrine providing perfect cover for his true allegiances. The 17th Legion's reputation for spreading imperial truth throughout conquered territories made them valuable assets for any campaign that required winning hearts and minds as well as military victories. Their chaplains possessed unmatched expertise in identifying and countering heretical beliefs, skills that would theoretically prove essential when confronting the corrupted ideologies that Horus was spreading among his followers. The Word-Bearers' transformation from loyal servants of the imperial truth into devoted worshippers of chaos represented one of the rebellion's greatest intelligence coups. Lorgar's careful cultivation of his reputation as a zealous imperial loyalist had provided perfect camouflage for decades of heretical activity, allowing him to spread chaos corruption throughout multiple legions without detection. His chaplains had established themselves as authorities on imperial doctrine, their positions of trust providing access to sensitive information and influential personnel across the entire military hierarchy. The Alpha Legion under Alfarius brought intelligence gathering and infiltration capabilities that no other force could match. The 20th Legion's complex organizational structure and secretive operational methods had made them the Imperium's premier specialists in unconventional warfare. Their ability to assume false identities and operate behind enemy lines would provide the expedition with crucial intelligence about Horus's plans and dispositions. The Legion's motto of "I am Alfarius" reflected their practice of allowing any member to assume their Primarch's identity when necessary, creating confusion among enemies who could never be certain which Alpha Legionnaire they were actually facing. Alfarius himself remained an enigma even to his brother Primarchs, his true loyalties and motivations hidden beneath layers of deception and misdirection. The Primarch's ability to appear in multiple locations simultaneously had led to speculation that he possessed some form of psychic duplication ability, though the truth behind this phenomenon remained unknown. His warriors shared their Primarch's talent for deception, their training emphasizing the importance of maintaining multiple false identities and operational covers simultaneously. The Imperial High Command's failure to detect the extent of chaos corruption within these four legions represented a catastrophic intelligence breakdown that would have devastating consequences for the expedition. The warrior lodge networks had operated beneath the notice of Imperial observers for decades, their activities dismissed as harmless fraternal organizations rather than recognized as vehicles for sedition. The Lodge's practice of recruiting across Legion boundaries had created communication channels that bypassed official Imperial intelligence networks, allowing traitors to coordinate their activities without detection. The Emperor's own psychic abilities, vast as they were, had been focused on his secret project beneath the Imperial Palace rather than monitoring his sons for signs of corruption. The Webway project required his constant attention to maintain the delicate psychic barriers that protected the nascent human portal from demonic incursion. This necessary distraction had created blind spots in his awareness that the Chaos Gods had exploited with devastating effectiveness. The Master of Mankind's confidence in his son's loyalty had made him vulnerable to their betrayal in ways that no external enemy could have achieved. Terra's intelligence apparatus had grown complacent during the long years of the Great Crusade's success, its analysts assuming that the Primarch's genetic programming made them incapable of betraying their creator. The concept of space marines turning against the Emperor seemed so fundamentally impossible that reports of Lodge activities were filed away without proper investigation. The bureaucratic nature of the Imperial hierarchy had created additional barriers to effective intelligence gathering, as information passed through multiple layers of command before reaching decision-makers who might have recognized its significance. The logistical challenges of assembling 7 full legions for deployment to the Isstvan system required mobilizing resources on a scale unprecedented even during the Great Crusade. Each legion required hundreds of transport vessels, millions of tons of supplies, and coordination with Mechanicum Forge worlds to ensure adequate ammunition and replacement equipment. The expedition's fleet would dwarf most sector battle groups, its firepower sufficient to reduce entire star systems to ash if necessary. The very scale of the deployment sent a clear message throughout Imperial space that the Emperor took Horus's rebellion with the utmost seriousness. Fleet commanders throughout the Segmentum Solar received priority orders to provide vessels and crews for the expedition, their own operations suspended to support the mission against the traitor Warmaster. The Imperial Navy's most experienced captains volunteered for assignment to the expedition fleet, understanding that the coming battle would determine the Imperium's future. Mechanicum Forge ships loaded with specialized equipment and technical personnel prepared to accompany the main fleet, their services essential for maintaining the expedition's vehicles and weapons during extended operations. The 3 primary assault legions began their preparations with characteristic efficiency, their Primarchs coordinating deployment schedules and tactical doctrine to ensure maximum effectiveness upon arrival in the Isstvan system. Ferrus Manus established his command structure aboard the battle barge Fist of Iron, the vessel's extensive communication arrays allowing him to maintain contact with his fellow Primarchs throughout the journey. The ship's armories contained some of the finest weapons in the Imperium, many crafted by Ferrus himself during quiet moments between campaigns. Vulcan oversaw the loading of specialized equipment aboard the Salamanders' fleet, ensuring that his warriors would have access to the flamers and melta-weapons that formed the core of their tactical doctrine. The Primarch personally inspected each vessel's magazines, his expertise in metallurgy allowing him to identify potential weaknesses in ammunition storage that could prove catastrophic during combat operations. The Salamanders' tradition of maintaining their own equipment extended to their ships, with each crew member trained in multiple technical specialties to ensure operational flexibility. Corax focused on intelligence gathering and reconnaissance preparation, his agents already working to establish contact with any loyalist elements that might remain within Horus's forces. The Raven Guard's network of informants and sympathizers throughout the Imperial military provided valuable insights into the Traitor Legion's recent activities and possible intentions. The Primarch's strategic planning emphasized the importance of understanding enemy capabilities and dispositions before committing to direct engagement, lessons learned during his youth on Deliverance proving applicable to this larger conflict. The corruption of the Primarchs had not occurred through crude bribery or obvious threats, but through a masterful campaign of psychological manipulation that exploited each brother's deepest insecurities and resentments. Horus understood his siblings better than they understood themselves, having observed their personalities and motivations during decades of shared warfare across the galaxy. The Warmaster's charisma had always been his greatest weapon, but now it served darker purposes as he wove a web of deceit that would ensnare half the Emperor's sons. Fulgrim of the Emperor's children had been the first to fall completely under Horus's influence, his perfectionist nature making him vulnerable to promises of transcendence beyond mortal limitations. The Warmaster had approached his brother during the Lair campaign, using their friendship to introduce concepts that gradually eroded Fulgrim's loyalty to the Emperor. Horus spoke of their father's hypocrisy in condemning religion while secretly planning his own apotheosis, planting seeds of doubt that would flourish under chaos corruption. The demon blade recovered from the Lair temple merely accelerated a process that Horus had already set in motion through careful manipulation of Fulgrim's pride and ambition. The Emperor's children's obsession with perfection provided the perfect vector for corruption, as their pursuit of flawless execution in all endeavors gradually shifted toward seeking perfection through excess and sensation. Horus encouraged this transformation by praising the Legion's innovations in combat techniques and artistic expression, validating their belief that they represented the pinnacle of Astartes' achievement. The Warmaster's approval carried enormous weight with Fulgrim, who had always sought recognition from his more successful brothers. This validation made the Phoenician receptive to increasingly radical ideas about transcending the limitations that the Emperor had supposedly placed upon his sons. Mortarian's recruitment required a different approach, as the Death Guard Primarch's hatred of psychers and distrust of the Emperor's psychic nature provided ready-made grievances for Horus to exploit. The Warmaster presented himself as a fellow victim of their father's deception, sharing fabricated intelligence about the Emperor's true plans for humanity that painted the Master of Mankind as a would-be tyrant seeking godhood through psychic domination. Horus emphasized the hypocrisy of condemning Lorgar's religious devotion while secretly planning to become the object of worship himself, a narrative that resonated deeply with Mortarian's own experiences of fighting against oppressive overlords on Barbaros. The Death Guard's stoic acceptance of hardship and their Primarch's philosophical nature made them ideal candidates for Nurgle's corruption, though neither Horus nor Mortarian initially understood the specific nature of the Chaos God they were serving. The Warmaster presented their rebellion as a rational response to the Emperor's betrayal of the Great Crusade's ideals, framing their actions as necessary steps to preserve the Imperium from their father's megalomaniacal ambitions. Mortarian's deep-seated resentment over being denied the chance to kill his adoptive father personally provided additional leverage, as Horus promised that their rebellion would allow each Primarch to settle old scores and claim the recognition they deserved. Angron's corruption proved simplest of all, requiring little more than validation of the World Eater's Primarch's existing rage against the Emperor for preventing him from dying alongside his gladiator brothers on Nuceria. The Warmaster understood that Angron's butcher's nails made rational argument impossible, but the cybernetic implants also made the Red Angel susceptible to appeals based on honor and brotherhood. Horus positioned himself as the only brother who truly understood Angron's pain, sharing stories of his own frustrations with the Emperor's distant and manipulative behavior. The promise of unrestricted warfare against their father's forces provided the World Eaters with an outlet for their perpetual rage that their Primarch found irresistible. The 12th Legion's transformation into mindless berserkers served Horus's purposes perfectly, as their uncontrolled fury would make them ideal shock troops for the most desperate battles of the coming civil war. Angron's inability to think strategically beyond the next battle meant that he posed no threat to Horus's leadership of the rebellion, while his reputation for ferocity would intimidate potential loyalist holdouts. The Warmaster carefully managed his interactions with the Red Angel, timing their meetings to coincide with periods when the butcher's nails were causing less acute pain, and Angron could focus on military planning rather than simply seeking the next opportunity for slaughter. Perturabo's recruitment represented perhaps Horus's greatest triumph of psychological manipulation, as the Iron Warrior's Primarch had maintained a facade of loyalty despite decades of accumulated resentment against the Imperial system. The Lord of Iron's bitterness over his legion's thankless assignments to siege warfare and garrison duty had festered for years, creating deep wells of anger that Horus could tap with carefully chosen words and gestures. The Warmaster presented himself as the only brother who truly appreciated Perturabo's genius, praising the Iron Warrior's technical achievements and lamenting their lack of recognition within the Imperial hierarchy. The 4th Legion's expertise in siege warfare and their vast stockpiles of heavy equipment made them invaluable assets for any sustained campaign against Imperial fortifications. Horus understood that Perturabo's analytical mind would require concrete evidence of the Emperor's supposed betrayal, so he provided fabricated intelligence reports and carefully edited communications that appeared to confirm the worst interpretations of their father's actions. The Warmaster's promise that the rebellion would finally allow Perturabo to demonstrate his superiority over Rogel Dorn and the other Primarchs who had received more prestigious assignments proved irresistible to the Lord of Iron's wounded pride. Conrad Kerr's descent into madness had accelerated during the years leading up to the heresy, his precognitive visions showing him increasingly dark futures for the Imperium and humanity itself. Horus exploited the Night Haunter's psychological instability by presenting the rebellion as an inevitable outcome that Kerrs had already foreseen, arguing that attempting to prevent it would only cause greater suffering in the long run. The Warmaster's manipulation of his brother's guilt over Nostromo's destruction and the Night Lord's brutal methods created a narrative where joining the rebellion became an act of mercy rather than betrayal. The 8th Legion's reputation for terror tactics and their Primarch's increasingly erratic behavior made them valuable assets for demoralizing loyalist forces and suppressing potential uprisings on worlds that might otherwise support the Emperor. Kerr's visions of his own death at the hands of an Imperial assassin provided additional motivation for rebellion, as the Night Haunter believed that striking first represented his only chance of survival. Horus carefully reinforced these paranoid beliefs by sharing intelligence about Malkador's growing network of agents and the increasing scrutiny that the Primarchs faced from Terra's bureaucracy. Lorgar's role in the conspiracy extended far beyond simple recruitment, as the Word-Bearer's Primarch had spent decades laying the theological groundwork for the rebellion through his secret worship of the Chaos Gods. The Aurelian's humiliation at Monarchia had provided the initial motivation for his turn to chaos, but his scholarly nature and genuine religious conviction made him the rebellion's most effective evangelist. Lorgar's chaplains had infiltrated multiple legions, spreading corrupted versions of imperial doctrine that gradually prepared their audiences for more radical heresies. The 17th Legion's transformation into devoted chaos worshippers had occurred slowly and carefully, with Lorgar ensuring that each step appeared to be a natural evolution of their existing beliefs rather than a complete abandonment of Imperial doctrine. The Word-bearers' expertise in theology and their reputation for spreading Imperial truth provided perfect cover for their heretical activities, allowing them to operate within Loyalist forces without suspicion. Lorgar's personal relationship with Horus had developed over years of secret meetings and shared rituals, creating bonds of trust and mutual dependence that made betrayal unthinkable for either Primarch. Alpharius and the Alpha Legion represented the rebellion's greatest intelligence asset. Their complex organizational structure and secretive operational methods having allowed them to infiltrate Imperial institutions at every level. The 20th Legion's practice of maintaining multiple identities and operational covers had created a network of agents throughout the Imperial military and civilian hierarchy, providing Horus with detailed intelligence about Loyalist plans and capabilities. The Primarch's enigmatic nature and his Legion's reputation for unconventional warfare made them ideal tools for sowing confusion and discord within enemy ranks. The Alpha Legion's true loyalties remained unclear even to their fellow traitors, as Alpharius maintained operational security protocols that prevented anyone from fully understanding his motivations or ultimate objectives. This ambiguity served Horus's purposes by creating uncertainty among potential Loyalist forces about which Imperial units could be trusted, forcing them to waste resources on internal security measures rather than focusing on offensive operations. The 20th Legion's ability to appear loyal while secretly serving the rebellion made them invaluable for gathering intelligence and conducting sabotage operations behind enemy lines. Horus's knowledge of the incoming Imperial response came through multiple sources, including intercepted communications, reports from Alpha Legion infiltrators, and intelligence provided by corrupted elements within the Imperial bureaucracy. The Warmaster understood that the Emperor would respond to the Isstvan III massacre with overwhelming force, dispatching multiple legions to bring the traitors to account. This knowledge allowed him to prepare the perfect trap, positioning his forces to maximize the effectiveness of the coming betrayal, while ensuring that Loyalist reinforcements would arrive at precisely the wrong moment to affect the battle's outcome. The selection of Ferrus Manus to lead the Loyalist expedition provided Horus with valuable intelligence about Imperial tactical planning and force dispositions. The Iron Hands Primarch's methodical approach to warfare and his close relationship with several other Loyalist Primarchs made him predictable in ways that Horus could exploit. The Warmaster's intimate knowledge of his brother's personality and tactical preferences, gained through decades of shared campaigns, allowed him to anticipate Ferrus's likely responses to various scenarios and prepare appropriate countermeasures. The coordination between traitor legions already committed to Horus's cause required careful management of competing personalities and conflicting objectives. Each corrupted Primarch brought his own agenda to the rebellion, creating potential sources of friction that could undermine their collective effectiveness if not properly managed. Horus established himself as the unquestioned leader of the rebellion through a combination of charisma, strategic brilliance, and careful distribution of responsibilities that played to each brother's strengths while minimizing opportunities for conflict. The Iron Warriors received primary responsibility for fortifying the Isstvan system and establishing the defensive positions that would channel Loyalist forces into predetermined killing zones. Perdurabo's expertise in siege warfare made him ideally suited for this task, while his desire for recognition ensured his complete commitment to the project's success. The Lord of Iron's analytical mind allowed him to identify the optimal positions for artillery emplacements and defensive strongpoints, creating overlapping fields of fire that would devastate any force attempting to assault the traitor positions. The Word-bearers took charge of maintaining morale and ideological purity among the rebellion's forces, their chaplains conducting regular ceremonies and rituals that reinforced the traitors' commitment to their cause. Lorgar's theological expertise proved essential for managing the various forms of chaos corruption that were beginning to manifest among the rebel forces, as different legions showed susceptibility to different aspects of the ruinous power's influence. The Aurelians' ability to present heretical concepts in terms that appeared consistent with imperial doctrine helped maintain unit cohesion during the early stages of the rebellion. The Night Lords assumed responsibility for intelligence gathering and psychological warfare operations, their terror tactics proving effective for extracting information from captured loyalists and intimidating potential defectors. Kerr's precognitive abilities provided strategic advantages that complemented the Alpha Legion's conventional intelligence gathering, allowing the traitors to anticipate loyalist movements and prepare appropriate responses. The 8th Legion's reputation for extreme brutality served as a deterrent against potential betrayals within the rebel ranks, as few warriors were willing to risk the Night Haunter's displeasure. The Alpha Legion maintained their role as the rebellion's primary intelligence service, their agents continuing to operate within loyalist forces and imperial institutions throughout the galaxy. Alfarius coordinated these operations personally, using his legion's unique organizational structure to maintain multiple parallel intelligence networks that could operate independently if one was compromised. The 20th Legion's ability to assume false identities allowed them to place agents in positions of trust within the expedition fleet, providing real-time intelligence about loyalist plans and dispositions. The strategic positioning of loyalist and traitor forces for the coming battle required precise timing and coordination across multiple star systems. Horus needed to ensure that the 3 primary assault legions would arrive at Isstvan Five before the 4 supporting legions, creating a window of opportunity where the loyalists would be outnumbered and vulnerable to betrayal. The Warmaster's control over astropathic communications in the region allowed him to manipulate the timing of messages and deployment orders, ensuring that the loyalist forces would arrive in the sequence that best served his purposes. The selection of Isstvan Five as the primary battlefield reflected careful analysis of the world's geography and strategic significance. The planet's mountainous terrain and limited landing zones would force the loyalist assault forces to deploy in predictable patterns, making them vulnerable to the carefully prepared ambush positions that Perturabo was constructing. The world's position within the Isstvan system provided multiple escape routes for traitor forces if the battle went poorly, while its distance from major imperial strongholds would prevent rapid reinforcement of loyalist forces. The Traitor Legion's preparation for the coming battle involved more than simple military planning, as the influence of chaos began to manifest in increasingly obvious ways among the rebel forces. Horus carefully managed these transformations, ensuring that the corruption enhanced his warriors' combat effectiveness without completely destroying their discipline and unit cohesion. The Warmaster's own relationship with the Chaos Gods remained complex, as he sought to use their power without becoming completely subservient to their will. The warp storms that had plagued the Isstvan system for months began to subside as the Loyalist expedition fleet translated back into real space at the system's edge. Ferrus Manus stood upon the command deck of the Fist of Iron, his necrodermis hands gripping the brass rail as tactical displays flickered to life around him. The sight that greeted the Iron Hands Primarch confirmed his worst fears about the scope of Horus's rebellion. Where intelligence reports had suggested a few companies of traitor marines might be fortifying key positions, augur readings now revealed massive defensive installations sprawling across multiple worlds. The expedition's lead elements had emerged from the warp in perfect formation, a testament to the navigational expertise of their crews and the Emperor's blessing upon their righteous mission. The Iron Hands battle barge Fist of Iron led the formation, flanked by the Salamanders' flagship Flamerot and the Raven guard vessel Shadow of the Emperor. Behind them stretched a fleet of unprecedented size, containing the full strength of 3 Space Marine legions and their supporting elements. Strike cruisers, battle barges, and escort vessels maintained precise spacing as they advanced deeper into the system, their weapon batteries charged and void shields raised against potential ambush. Ferrus activated the fleet-wide communication array, his voice carrying across the Vox channels with characteristic authority. The Primarch's words reached every vessel in the formation, from the smallest escort to the mightiest battle barge, as he outlined the tactical situation facing their forces. Long-range sensors had detected extensive fortifications on Isstvan Five, the system's fifth planet, where Horus appeared to have concentrated the majority of his remaining forces after the virus bombing of Isstvan Three. The traitor Warmaster had chosen his ground well, selecting a world whose geography would favor defensive operations while limiting the Loyalists' ability to bring their superior numbers to bear effectively. The Iron Hands Primarch's tactical assessment revealed the full extent of the challenge facing the expedition. Isstvan Five possessed a single major landmass dominated by the Urgal Depression, a vast crater-like formation surrounded by towering mountain ranges that created natural choke points for any attacking force. The planet's thin atmosphere and frequent dust storms would limit air support operations while providing cover for defending forces equipped with appropriate filtration systems. Orbital bombardment remained an option, but the presence of void shield generators and anti-aircraft batteries throughout the highland regions would make such operations costly and potentially ineffective. Reconnaissance flights launched from the expedition fleet provided detailed imagery of the traitor positions, revealing the scope of Perdurabo's defensive preparations. The Iron Warriors had transformed the Urgal Depression into a killing field of interlocking fire zones, with artillery positions carved into the surrounding cliffs and bunker complexes built into the natural rock formations. Supply tunnels connected these positions to underground magazines and command centers, creating a defensive network that could continue functioning even if individual strongpoints were overrun. The sight of these fortifications filled Ferrus with cold rage, as he recognized the hand of his brother Perdurabo in their design and construction. The highlands surrounding the depression bristled with additional defensive installations, their positions carefully chosen to dominate the approaches that any assault force would need to use. Anti-aircraft laser batteries and missile launchers covered every possible landing zone, while camouflaged observation posts provided overlapping surveillance of the entire region. The traitors had clearly spent months preparing these positions, using their knowledge of Imperial tactical doctrine to create defenses specifically designed to counter Loyalist assault methods. The precision and thoroughness of the preparations suggested that Horus had known about the expedition's deployment well in advance of its arrival. Vulcan's voice crackled across the command channel as the Salamanders' Primarch shared his own observations from the flame rod. The 18th Legion sensors had detected massive heat signatures throughout the highland positions, indicating the presence of heavy weapons and power generation facilities that would be necessary to support extended defensive operations. The thermal imaging revealed underground complexes far more extensive than initial visual reconnaissance had suggested, with tunnel networks that might allow traitor forces to redeploy rapidly between different defensive positions. The Salamanders' expertise in siege warfare made Vulcan particularly aware of the challenges these installations would present to attacking forces. Corax added his own analysis from aboard the Shadow of the Emperor, his legion's reconnaissance specialists having identified patterns in the defensive layout that suggested specific tactical priorities. The Raven Guard's stealth capabilities had allowed them to conduct closer surveillance of the traitor positions, revealing details that conventional sensors might have missed. Guard rotations, supply movements, and communication patterns all indicated that the traitors were preparing for a prolonged siege rather than a quick, decisive battle. The level of organization and discipline visible in these preparations contradicted reports that suggested the rebel forces were demoralized and poorly coordinated. The three Primarchs coordinated their tactical planning through secure Vox channels, their decades of experience in combined operations allowing them to develop assault plans with remarkable speed and efficiency. Ferrus advocated for a direct assault on the strongest traitor positions, arguing that the Iron Hand's superior equipment and training would allow them to break through even the most formidable defenses. His analysis emphasized the importance of maintaining offensive momentum, preventing the traitors from settling into a defensive routine that would maximize the effectiveness of their prepared positions. Vulcan proposed a more methodical approach that would use the Salamanders' siege warfare expertise to systematically reduce the traitor fortifications before committing to a general assault. The 18th Legion's flamers and melta-weapons were ideally suited for clearing bunker complexes and underground installations, while their experience in fighting in extreme environments would prove valuable in the harsh conditions of Isstvan Five. The Salamanders' Primarch emphasized the importance of minimizing casualties among the Loyalist forces, arguing that preserving their strength would be essential for the larger campaign against Horus's rebellion. Korak suggested combining elements of both approaches, using the Raven Guard's stealth capabilities to identify weak points in the traitor defenses, while the Iron Hands and Salamanders prepared for the main assault. The 19th Legion's reconnaissance teams could infiltrate the highland positions under cover of darkness, gathering intelligence about traitor dispositions and potentially sabotaging key installations before the general attack began. This approach would maximize the expedition's advantages in mobility and surprise, while minimizing exposure to the traitors' prepared defensive fires. The debate over tactical approaches reflected deeper philosophical differences between the three Primarchs and their legions. Ferrus's aggressive nature and his personal hatred of Horus drove him toward immediate action, his desire for vengeance against the traitor Warmaster overwhelming more cautious strategic considerations. The Iron Hands Primarch viewed the rebellion as a personal betrayal that demanded swift and decisive punishment, regardless of the costs involved. His necrodermis hands clenched as he studied the tactical displays, their living metal surface rippling with barely contained emotion. The Primarch's relationship with Fulgrim added another layer of complexity to his emotional state, as intelligence reports suggested that the Emperor's children were among the traitor forces on Isstvan Five. The thought of confronting his closest brother in battle filled Ferrus with a mixture of rage and sorrow that threatened to cloud his tactical judgment. Decades of friendship and shared experiences made the prospect of fighting Fulgrim almost unbearable, yet the Iron Hands Primarch understood that duty demanded he set aside personal feelings in service of the Emperor's will. Ferrus's strategic planning revealed his intention to personally lead the assault on the strongest traitor positions, believing that his presence would inspire his warriors while demonstrating the futility of resistance to any traitors who might still harbor doubts about their chosen path. The Primarch's confidence in his own abilities and those of his legion had been reinforced by centuries of successful campaigns, creating a certainty that Iron Hand's superiority would prove decisive regardless of the odds they faced. This confidence, while admirable, also created blind spots in his tactical thinking that more cautious commanders might have avoided. The Iron Hands clan-based organization allowed for rapid deployment of specialized forces tailored to specific tactical requirements. Clan Rakan's expertise in armored warfare made them ideal for spearheading assaults on fortified positions, while Clan Saugal's technical specialists could provide crucial support for breaching operations and equipment maintenance. Each clan company operated with considerable autonomy, allowing Ferrus to deploy multiple simultaneous assaults without requiring constant coordination from central command. This flexibility would prove essential in the complex terrain of Isstvan Five, where traditional formation fighting might prove impossible. The Legion's extensive use of augmetic implants provided advantages that would prove crucial in the coming battle. Enhanced visual systems allowed Iron Hands Marines to operate effectively in the dust storms that frequently swept across Isstvan Five, while reinforced skeletal structures and organ replacements increased their resistance to the high-velocity impacts that characterized modern warfare. The clan brothers' mechanical limbs could interface directly with vehicle systems and heavy weapons, creating seamless integration between warrior and machine that maximized combat effectiveness. Vulcan's approach to the tactical situation reflected his legion's philosophy of measured aggression, combined with concern for preserving human life. The Salamanders' Primarch understood that the traitor forces on Isstvan Five included thousands of Imperial army personnel and ship crews who might have been coerced into rebellion rather than choosing it freely. His tactical planning incorporated provisions for accepting surrenders and protecting non-combatants, even though such considerations would complicate the assault operations. This humanitarian approach sometimes frustrated his brother Primarchs, but Vulcan maintained that the Imperium's ultimate purpose was to serve humanity rather than simply dominate it. The 18th Legion's expertise in craftsmanship extended to their tactical equipment, with each battle brother maintaining weapons and armor to standards that exceeded even Mechanicum specifications. The Salamanders' preference for flame and melta weapons reflected both their homeworld's volcanic environment and their tactical doctrine of close-quarters combat. These weapons would prove particularly effective against the bunker complexes and underground installations that dominated the traitor defensive positions, their ability to clear enclosed spaces making them invaluable for siege operations. Corax's tactical analysis emphasized the importance of intelligence gathering and target identification before committing to major assault operations. The Raven Guard Primarch's experience during the liberation of Deliverance had taught him that superior information could overcome significant disadvantages in numbers and equipment. His Legion's stealth capabilities would allow them to operate behind enemy lines, gathering crucial intelligence about traitor dispositions and identifying high-value targets for elimination. This approach required patience and careful coordination, qualities that sometimes conflicted with the more aggressive instincts of his brother Primarchs. The 19th Legion's gene seed mutations had gifted them with enhanced eyesight and pale skin that made them appear almost spectral in certain lighting conditions. These adaptations, combined with their preference for black armor and stealth equipment, made them ideally suited for reconnaissance operations in the harsh environment of Isstvan Five. The planet's frequent dust storms and limited visibility would actually favor the Raven Guard's operational methods, allowing them to move undetected through terrain that would challenge other legions. As the three Primarchs finalized their assault plans, long-range communications detected the approach of the expedition's second wave. The Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Word-Bearers, and Alpha Legion were maintaining their assigned positions in the outer system, their fleets holding station at the designated coordinates while awaiting orders to join the primary assault. The presence of these four legions provided the expedition with overwhelming numerical superiority, ensuring that Horus's forces would face impossible odds regardless of their defensive preparations. The timing of the second wave's arrival had been carefully coordinated to provide maximum tactical flexibility for the assault operations. Ferrus could call upon their support if the initial assault encountered unexpected resistance, while their presence in the outer system would prevent any traitor forces from escaping the Isstvan system. The four supporting legions brought specialized capabilities that complemented the primary assault force, with the Iron Warrior's siege expertise, the Night Lord's terror tactics, the Word-Bearer's ideological warfare capabilities, and the Alpha Legion's intelligence operations, providing comprehensive coverage of all tactical requirements. Perdurabo's reputation for siege warfare made his legion's participation particularly valuable, as the Iron Warriors possessed more experience in reducing fortified positions than any other force in the Imperium. The 4th Legion's methodical approach to fortress warfare would provide essential support for the assault on the Urgal Depression, their heavy artillery and specialized equipment capable of breaching even the most formidable defenses. The Lord of Iron's analytical mind and his warriors' technical expertise would prove crucial for overcoming the defensive installations that dominated the traitor positions. The expedition's logistics trains stretched across multiple star systems, with supply convoys and support vessels maintaining the flow of ammunition, fuel, and replacement equipment necessary for sustained operations. The scale of this logistical effort dwarfed most sector-level military operations, requiring coordination between dozens of Mechanicum Forge worlds and Imperial Navy supply depots. The careful planning and resource allocation necessary for such an undertaking demonstrated the Imperium's commitment to ending Horus's rebellion quickly and decisively. Ferrus issued final deployment orders as the expedition fleet assumed assault formation, the three legions preparing for what promised to be one of the largest military operations in Imperial history. The Iron Hands would spearhead the assault on the Urgal Depression's eastern approaches, their armored spearheads supported by Salamanders siege specialists and Raven Guard reconnaissance teams. The coordination between the three forces reflected years of joint training and shared combat experience, their tactical integration representing the pinnacle of Imperial military doctrine. The sight of three full Space Marine legions preparing for planetary assault created a spectacle of power that few enemies of the Imperium had ever witnessed. Thousands of drop pods loaded with elite warriors prepared for launch, while Thunderhawk gunships and other assault craft warmed their engines in preparation for the coming battle. The expedition's fleet assumed bombardment positions, their weapon batteries trained on the traitor fortifications as final targeting calculations were completed. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not only the fate of the Isstvan system, but the future of the Imperium itself. The first drop pods screamed through Isstvan Five's thin atmosphere like falling stars, their heat shields glowing cherry red as they plummeted toward the rocky highlands surrounding the Urgal Depression. Ferrus Manus had positioned himself aboard the lead pod of the Iron Hands assault force, his massive frame secured within the cramped confines of the deployment chamber as proximity alarms chimed their countdown to impact. Around him, his Morlock's bodyguard checked their weapons one final time, the elite Terminator's cataphracti armor gleaming dully in the pod's crimson interior lighting. The Primarch's augmetic eyes tracked the tactical displays mounted on the pod's walls, watching as hundreds of similar craft descended toward predetermined landing zones across the Depression's rim. The Iron Hands had drawn the most direct approach to the traitor positions, their drop pods aimed at landing zone Kappa, a relatively flat stretch of ground that offered the best prospects for establishing a beachhead. Intelligence reports suggested the area was lightly defended, though Ferrus harbored no illusions about the reception awaiting his warriors once they made planetfall. Retro thrusters fired in sequence as the drop pods entered their final descent phase, the sudden deceleration pressing the Iron Hands against their restraint harnesses with crushing force. Through the pod's optical feeds, Ferrus caught glimpses of the Urgal Depression's forbidding landscape rushing up to meet them. The massive crater stretched for dozens of kilometers in every direction, its floor a maze of rocky outcroppings and ancient lava flows that would provide countless hiding places for defending forces. The surrounding highlands rose like jagged teeth against the pale sky, their slopes bristling with the geometric shapes of bunkers and gun emplacements. The first impact sent shockwaves through the rocky ground as Iron Hands drop pods slammed into the designated landing zones with thunderous crashes. Explosive bolts detonated around each pod's circumference, blowing the armored petals outward to create instant firing positions for the warriors within. Ferrus emerged from his pod with characteristic directness, his necrodermis hands already shifting into weapon configurations as he surveyed the tactical situation. The landing zone stretched before him like a lunar landscape, its surface scarred by countless craters and littered with the twisted remains of ancient structures. The Primarch's enhanced senses immediately detected the acrid smell of weapons discharge and the ozone tang of energy weapons warming up in the distance. Muzzle flashes flickered from concealed positions among the rocky outcroppings, while the distinctive whine of last cannons charging echoed across the Depression's rim. The traitors had allowed the first wave to land unopposed, but their response came swiftly as hidden gun positions opened fire on the newly established beachheads. Law's bolts and autocannon rounds streaked across the landing zones, forcing the Iron Hands to seek cover behind their drop pods and the natural rock formations that dotted the area. Clan Raukon's armored spearhead materialized moments later as their land raiders and predator tanks descended via heavy-lift Thunderhawks, the aircraft's engines screaming under the strain of their massive cargo loads. The vehicles touched down with grinding impacts that sent clouds of dust and debris swirling across the landing zone, their crews immediately beginning deployment procedures, while enemy fire intensified around them. The sight of Iron Hands armor emerging from the transport craft seemed to galvanize the traitor defenders, as the volume of incoming fire increased dramatically once the tanks began advancing toward their assigned objectives. Ferrus coordinated the initial deployment through his legion's command network, his voice carrying across encrypted Vox channels as he directed his clan companies toward their primary targets. The Iron Hands had trained for exactly this type of assault countless times during the Great Crusade, their doctrine emphasizing rapid deployment and immediate offensive action to prevent enemy forces from organizing effective resistance. The Primarch's tactical planning called for simultaneous advances along multiple axes, preventing the traitors from concentrating their defensive fires against any single thrust. The Salamanders made planetfall 3 kilometers to the south, their drop pods descending toward landing zone Sigma with characteristic precision. Vulcan had chosen to accompany the 3rd company in their assault, the Primarch's massive frame easily identifiable even within the confines of his custom drop pod. The Salamanders' approach to the landing differed markedly from their Iron Hands brothers, with greater emphasis placed on establishing secure positions before advancing toward enemy strongpoints. This methodical approach reflected both their tactical doctrine and their Primarch's concern for minimizing casualties among his warriors. The 18th Legion's landing zone occupied a narrow valley between 2 towering cliff faces, a position that offered some protection from long-range artillery, but also created potential choke points that defending forces could exploit. Vulcan had accepted these risks in exchange for proximity to several bunker complexes that intelligence reports had identified as key nodes in the traitor defensive network. The Salamanders' expertise with flame and melta weapons made them ideally suited for clearing these installations, though reaching them would require advancing through terrain that heavily favored the defenders. Thunderhawk gunships swept low over the Salamanders' positions, their heavy bolters and las cannons suppressing enemy fire points while the Legion established its initial perimeter. The aircraft's pilots maintained constant communication with ground forces, adjusting their attack runs to support the advancing Marines while avoiding the increasingly accurate anti-aircraft fire that rose from concealed positions throughout the highlands. Several Thunderhawks took hits from missile launchers and laser batteries, their armored hulls scarred by near misses as they struggled to maintain air superiority over the contested landing zones. The Raven Guard chose a more unconventional approach to planetary assault, with Corax leading selected companies in a high-altitude insertion that bypassed the heavily defended approaches entirely. The 19th Legion's jump pack, equipped assault squads, descended through the upper atmosphere under cover of darkness, their black armor rendering them nearly invisible against the star-filled sky. This infiltration technique required exceptional skill and coordination, as the Marines had to navigate through defensive fire while maintaining formation cohesion during their extended descent. Corax touched down on a rocky plateau overlooking the Urgal Depression's northern rim, his position offering commanding views of the traitor fortifications while remaining concealed from most observation posts. The Raven Guard Primarch immediately began coordinating reconnaissance operations, his legion's specialized equipment allowing them to gather detailed intelligence about enemy positions and movement patterns. This information proved invaluable for the other assault forces, as it revealed defensive installations that orbital surveillance had failed to detect. The traitor response to the Loyalist landings demonstrated both the extent of their preparations and the quality of their defensive planning. Rather than attempting to contest every landing zone simultaneously, Horus's forces concentrated their efforts on disrupting the Loyalists' ability to coordinate their advances. Artillery barrages targeted command vehicles and communication arrays, while infiltration teams armed with demolition charges struck at supply dumps and ammunition stockpiles. This approach reflected sophisticated understanding of Imperial tactical doctrine and suggested that the traitors had received detailed intelligence about the expedition's operational methods. Sons of Horus forces occupied the strongest positions within the Urgal Depression itself, their sea-green armor easily identifiable among the rocky terrain as they moved between prepared fighting positions. The 16th Legion had established multiple strongpoints throughout the Depression's floor, each one carefully positioned to provide mutual support while maximizing fields of fire across the approaches that attacking forces would need to use. Their tactical deployment showed clear signs of Horus's personal involvement, as the positioning reflected the Warmaster's intimate knowledge of his loyalist brother's preferred assault methods. The Emperor's children held the depression's eastern approaches, their purple and gold armor gleaming despite the dust and debris that filled the air. Fulgrim's warriors had constructed elaborate defensive works that combined practical military engineering with their legion's characteristic attention to aesthetic detail. These positions incorporated artistic elements that served tactical purposes, with sculptural gun emplacements and decoratively carved firing slits that provided both protection and psychological impact. The sight of these installations filled many iron hands with rage, as they recognized the perversion of their Primarch's craftsmanship ideals in the traitors' works. Death Guard positions dominated the Depression's southern sector, their pale green armor and Baroque equipment creating an ominous presence among the rocky outcroppings. Mortarian's warriors had prepared their defensive positions with characteristic thoroughness, incorporating chemical weapons and biological agents that would make any assault extremely costly for attacking forces. The 14th Legion's expertise in attrition warfare was clearly evident in their tactical deployment, as they had chosen positions that would force loyalist forces to advance through multiple killing zones while exposed to concentrated defensive fire. World Eater's forces occupied the most forward positions, their white and blue armor stained with gore from recent battles as they prowled through advanced outposts and listening stations. Angron's warriors showed little interest in conventional defensive tactics, instead positioning themselves for immediate counterattacks against any loyalist forces that managed to establish footholds within the Depression. The 12th Legion's Berserker implants made them unsuitable for prolonged defensive operations, but their ferocity in close combat would make them formidable opponents for any assault troops who reached their positions. The initial exchanges of fire revealed the sophistication of the traitor defensive preparations and the scale of the challenge facing the loyalist forces. Automated weapon systems opened fire from concealed positions throughout the highlands, their targeting systems apparently slaved to centralized fire control networks that coordinated defensive fires with devastating effectiveness. Lascannon batteries and missile launchers engaged loyalist vehicles at maximum range, while heavy bolter positions swept the landing zones with sustained bursts that forced advancing Marines to seek cover behind whatever protection they could find. Ferrus led the Iron Hand's advance personally, his massive form easily visible as he strode through the defensive fire with apparent indifference to the law's bolts and solid rounds that sparked off his armor. The Primarch's necrodermis hands had reshaped themselves into devastating weapons, one forming a massive power fist, while the other extended razor-sharp talons that could slice through ceramite with ease. His presence on the battlefield inspired his warriors to greater efforts, as clan companies advanced in coordinated rushes that gradually closed the distance to the traitor positions. The Iron Hand's tactical doctrine emphasized the integration of infantry and armor in combined arms operations, with tactical squads providing fire support while land raiders and rhinos transported assault troops toward their objectives. This approach proved effective against the traitor defensive positions, as the vehicle's heavy armor could absorb punishment that would devastate unprotected infantry, while their weapons provided the firepower necessary to suppress enemy strongholds. The sight of Iron Hand's armor advancing through the defensive fire created an impression of inexorable progress that began to affect traitor morale in some sectors. Clan Sogol's Devastator squads established fire support positions among the rocky outcroppings that surrounded the landing zones, their heavy weapons providing covering fire for the advancing infantry, while engaging priority targets identified by forward observers. The squad's missile launchers and lascannons proved particularly effective against bunker installations, their precision fire-destroying gun emplacements and observation posts that might otherwise have disrupted the assault. The Iron Hand's superior equipment and training began to tell as they systematically reduced the traitor defensive positions through concentrated fire and maneuver. Vulcan's advance proceeded more cautiously, with Salamander's squads using their flame weapons to clear suspected ambush positions before committing to forward movement. The 18th Legion's approach emphasized thorough clearance of each position rather than rapid advance, accepting slower progress in exchange for reduced casualties and more secure lines of communication. This methodical approach proved wise as hidden traitor positions revealed themselves through premature attacks on what appeared to be isolated Salamanders units, only to find themselves facing concentrated retaliation from supporting squads. The Salamanders' expertise in close-quarters combat became apparent as they began clearing the bunker complexes that dotted their assigned sector. Tactical squads equipped with flamers and meltaguns systematically reduced each installation, their weapons proving devastatingly effective against defenders trapped in enclosed spaces. The sight of Salamanders emerging from cleared bunkers, their armor scorched but intact, created a psychological impact that began to affect traitor resistance in adjacent positions. Corax coordinated the Raven Guard's reconnaissance efforts from his elevated position, his Legion's stealth capabilities allowing them to gather detailed intelligence about traitor dispositions and movement patterns. This information proved crucial for the other assault forces, as it revealed the locations of command posts, ammunition dumps, and reinforcement routes that might otherwise have remained hidden until too late. The 19th Legion's ability to operate behind enemy lines also allowed them to conduct sabotage operations that disrupted traitor communications and supply lines. The Loyalist advance gained momentum as the three legions began to coordinate their efforts more effectively, with information sharing and mutual support allowing them to exploit weaknesses in the traitor defensive network. The Iron Hand's direct assault methods complemented the Salamanders' methodical clearance operations, while the Raven Guard's intelligence gathering allowed both forces to avoid ambushes and identify high-value targets. This cooperation reflected the bonds of brotherhood that had been forged during decades of joint operations throughout the Great Crusade. The traitor forces began to show signs of strain as the Loyalist assault pressed deeper into their defensive positions, with some units withdrawing from forward positions rather than risk being overrun by the advancing Marines. However, this apparent weakness masked a more sinister reality, as the withdrawing forces were being repositioned according to predetermined plans that would channel the Loyalists into carefully prepared killing zones deeper within the depression. The true test of the assault was yet to come, as Horus's forces prepared to reveal the full extent of their defensive preparations. The Vox channels crackled with confirmation signals as the second wave of the Loyalist expedition translated from the warp at the outer edges of the Isstvan system. 4 additional Space Marine legions had arrived to support the ongoing assault, their massive fleets emerging from the Empyrean in perfect formation, despite the treacherous warp currents that still plagued the region. The Iron Warriors led the formation aboard their flagship Iron Blood, Perdurabo's vessel bristling with the siege equipment and heavy artillery that had made the 4th Legion infamous throughout the Great Crusade. Behind the Iron Warriors came the Night Lord's fleet, their ships painted in midnight blue and adorned with the skull motifs that had terrorized countless worlds into compliance. The Nightfall, Conrad Kerr's personal vessel, maintained position at the formation center, its sensor arrays already conducting detailed scans of the tactical situation developing around Isstvan Five. The Night Haunter's precognitive abilities had been providing disturbing visions of the battle's outcome, images of betrayal and bloodshed that he had shared with none of his brother Primarchs. The Word-Bearers approached in their crimson-hulled vessels, their fleet formations incorporating the ritual patterns that Lorgar had developed during decades of secret chaos worship. The Fidelitas Lex served as the 17th Legion's flagship, its hull decorated with elaborate scriptwork that appeared to be devotional texts, but contained hidden blasphemies that would have horrified loyal Imperial observers. Lorgar himself stood within the ship's cathedral-like command center, conducting final preparations for the betrayal that would soon unfold. The Alpha Legion brought up the rear of the formation, their ships maintaining the unmarked appearance that had become their signature throughout the Great Crusade. The 20th Legion's vessels showed no external signs of their true allegiances, their crews maintaining perfect operational security even as they prepared to reveal their treachery. Alfarius coordinated the fleet's movements from an undisclosed location, his presence distributed among multiple vessels according to his Legion's standard protocols for command redundancy. Ferrus Manus received the second wave's arrival notification while directing Iron Hand's assault operations from a forward command post established among the rocky outcroppings that surrounded Landing Zone Kappa. The Primarch's augmetic systems processed the tactical implications of the reinforcements' arrival, calculating deployment patterns and support options that would maximize the Loyalist forces' advantages in the coming phase of the battle. The presence of 4 additional legions would provide overwhelming numerical superiority, ensuring that Horus's rebellion would be crushed regardless of the traitors' defensive preparations. The Iron Hands Primarch opened communication channels with the arriving forces, his voice carrying across the Vox networks as he coordinated the expansion of the Loyalist beachhead. Perdurabo's expertise in siege warfare would prove invaluable for reducing the remaining traitor strongholds, while the Night Lord's terror tactics could demoralize defending forces and encourage surrenders that might otherwise require costly assaults. The Word-Bearer's reputation for ideological warfare made them ideal for countering whatever heretical propaganda Horus might be using to maintain his followers' loyalty. Perdurabo's response came through encrypted channels, the Lord of Iron's voice betraying none of the bitter resentment that had driven him to embrace Horus's rebellion. The Iron Warriors Primarch reported his legion's readiness to begin immediate deployment operations, their siege equipment and heavy artillery prepared for rapid emplacement once suitable positions could be identified. The 4th Legion's Thunderhawk squadrons were already launching reconnaissance flights to survey the tactical situation and identify optimal firing positions for their massive guns. The Iron Warriors began their descent toward predetermined coordinates on the depression's western rim, their drop pods and heavy landers following approach vectors that would position them to support the ongoing assault operations. Perdurabo had selected positions that would allow his artillery to provide fire support for all 3 primary assault legions while maintaining security for his own forces. The Lord of Iron's tactical planning appeared flawless, his deployment orders reflecting the methodical approach that had made him the Imperium's premier siege warfare specialist. Conrad Kurz acknowledged the deployment orders with characteristic brevity, his communications revealing nothing of the internal struggle between his loyalty to the Emperor and his growing certainty that the Imperium was doomed to fall into darkness. The Night Lords began their approach toward assigned positions on the depression's northern approaches, their stealth-equipped vessels avoiding the main approach routes that might expose them to defensive fire. The 8th Legion's expertise in terror tactics and psychological warfare would complement the conventional assault operations being conducted by their Loyalist brothers. The Night Lords' deployment patterns reflected their Primarch's precognitive insights, as Kurz positioned his forces to exploit weaknesses in the traitor defensive network that conventional reconnaissance had failed to identify. The 8th Legion's assault companies prepared for immediate combat operations, their weapons and equipment configured for the close-quarters fighting that would characterize urban warfare within the depression's built-up areas. The sight of Night Lords preparing for battle created an atmosphere of anticipation among the Loyalist forces, as the Legion's reputation for swift and decisive action was well known throughout the expedition. Lorger's response to the deployment orders carried undertones of religious fervor that his Loyalist brothers attributed to his well-known devotion to imperial doctrine. The Word-Bearer's Primarch spoke of the righteous crusade against heresy and the Emperor's judgment upon those who had betrayed their oaths, his words carefully chosen to reinforce his apparent loyalty while concealing his true intentions. The 17th Legion began their approach toward positions that would allow them to support the ongoing assault while maintaining flexibility for future operations. The Word-Bearer's deployment included extensive chaplain detachments equipped for ideological warfare against the traitor forces, their role supposedly focused on countering whatever heretical beliefs Horus might be using to maintain his followers' loyalty. These chaplains carried portable shrines and devotional materials that appeared to be standard imperial religious artifacts, but actually contained chaos-corrupted items that would serve their true purpose when the moment for betrayal arrived. The Legion's tactical deployment positioned them to maximize their effectiveness when they revealed their allegiance to the Warmaster. Alfarius maintained operational security protocols that prevented even his supposed allies from determining his exact location or intentions. The Alpha Legion's communications followed standard Imperial formats while containing hidden meanings that only initiated members could decipher. The 20th Legion's deployment appeared to follow conventional support patterns, with their forces positioned to provide intelligence gathering and infiltration capabilities that would enhance the overall effectiveness of the Loyalist assault. The true nature of their mission remained concealed beneath layers of deception and misdirection. The coordination between first and second wave forces proceeded according to established Imperial doctrine, with the arriving legions integrating their operations with the ongoing assault through careful planning and resource allocation. Forward observers from the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard provided targeting data for the Iron Warriors' artillery, while reconnaissance teams shared intelligence about traitor dispositions and defensive preparations. This cooperation created the impression of a unified command structure working toward common objectives. Ferrus coordinated the expanded assault operations from his forward command post, his tactical displays showing the positions of all 7 legions as they prepared for the final phase of the battle. The Iron Hands Primarch's planning emphasized the importance of maintaining offensive momentum, while the traitor forces remained off balance from the initial assault. The arrival of reinforcements provided opportunities for simultaneous attacks along multiple axes that would prevent Horus's forces from concentrating their defensive efforts effectively. Vulcan reported successful clearance of several bunker complexes within his assigned sector, the Salamander's methodical approach having reduced multiple strongpoints without suffering significant casualties. The 18th Legion's expertise in siege warfare had proven effective against the traitor fortifications, their flame and melta weapons clearing defensive positions that might have required extensive artillery bombardment to reduce. The Salamander's progress created opportunities for exploitation that the arriving reinforcements could capitalize upon immediately. Corax provided detailed intelligence reports about traitor movement patterns and defensive preparations, his legion's reconnaissance operations having identified several high-value targets that conventional surveillance had missed. The Raven Guard's stealth capabilities had allowed them to observe traitor command posts and supply depots that could be targeted by the Iron Warriors' artillery or subjected to infiltration attacks by Night Lord's assault teams. This intelligence proved crucial for planning the final assault operations that would break traitor resistance. The 3 Primarchs of the primary assault force conducted tactical discussions through secure communication channels, their planning sessions focusing on the optimal employment of their newly arrived reinforcements. Ferrus advocated for immediate expansion of the assault to take advantage of the numerical superiority that the second wave provided, arguing that overwhelming force applied quickly would minimize casualties among Loyalist forces. His tactical analysis emphasized the importance of preventing the traitors from adapting their defensive plans to account for the additional threats they now faced. Vulcan proposed a more methodical approach that would use the Iron Warrior's siege capabilities to systematically reduce the remaining traitor strongholds before committing to a general assault. The Salamander's Primarch's experience in fortress warfare made him acutely aware of the casualties that hasty assaults could inflict, particularly when attacking well-prepared defensive positions. His planning emphasized the importance of using superior firepower to degrade traitor capabilities before exposing Loyalist infantry to defensive fire. Corax suggested combining reconnaissance operations with targeted strikes against key installations, using the Night Lord's terror tactics and the Alpha Legion's infiltration capabilities to disrupt traitor command and control systems. The Raven Guard Primarch's analysis identified several critical vulnerabilities in the traitor defensive network that could be exploited through precise application of specialized capabilities rather than brute force assaults. This approach would maximize the expedition's advantages in mobility and surprise while minimizing exposure to prepared defensive fires. The final assault plan incorporated elements from all three approaches, creating a comprehensive strategy that would employ each legion's specialized capabilities while maintaining overall coordination and mutual support. The Iron Warriors would establish artillery positions that could provide fire support for advancing forces while engaging priority targets identified by reconnaissance teams. The Night Lords would conduct infiltration operations designed to create confusion and panic among traitor forces while eliminating key personnel and installations. The Word-Bearers would deploy their chaplain detachments to counter traitor propaganda and encourage defections among Horus's followers who might still harbor doubts about their chosen path. The Alpha Legion would continue their intelligence-gathering operations while preparing for potential sabotage missions against critical infrastructure within the traitor defensive network. This multifaceted approach promised to overwhelm the traitor's ability to respond effectively while providing multiple options for exploitation as opportunities developed. Perturabo began emplacing his legion's heavy artillery in positions that commanded the approaches to the Urgal Depression. His guns trained on the strongest traitor fortifications, while maintaining the ability to shift fires rapidly as tactical situations developed. The Iron Warrior's siege equipment included weapons that had been designed specifically for reducing Space Marine fortifications, their firepower sufficient to penetrate even the strongest defensive installations that the traitors might have constructed. The sight of these massive guns being positioned created confidence among loyalist forces that no traitor stronghold could withstand the coming bombardment. The Iron Warrior's tactical deployment reflected Perturabo's intimate knowledge of siege warfare and his understanding of the defensive installations that his brother Primarchs would likely construct. The Lord of Iron positioned his forces to exploit specific weaknesses in fortification design that other commanders might not recognize, his analytical mind identifying firing solutions that would maximize the effectiveness of his artillery while minimizing exposure to counter battery fire. The precision of these preparations suggested that the final assault would be devastating in its effectiveness. Conrad Kurz positioned his Night Lords for infiltration operations that would begin under cover of darkness, their stealth equipment and terror tactics ideally suited for the psychological warfare that would precede the main assault. The Night Haunter's precognitive abilities allowed him to anticipate traitor responses and position his forces accordingly, though the visions that guided his planning contained disturbing elements that he chose not to share with his loyalist brothers. The 8th Legion's preparations included specialized equipment for urban warfare and close quarters combat that would characterize fighting within the Depression's built-up areas. The subtle positioning of the second wave forces created tactical advantages that would prove crucial when the moment for betrayal arrived. Each traitor legion had positioned itself to maximize the effectiveness of their surprise attack while maintaining the appearance of supporting the loyalist assault. The Iron Warriors' artillery positions commanded not only the traitor strongholds, but also the loyalist landing zones and assembly areas, their guns capable of devastating the primary assault forces if turned against them. The Night Lords occupied positions that would allow them to strike at loyalist command posts and communication centers, disrupting coordination when it would be most desperately needed. The Word-Bearers had deployed their forces to maximize their ability to engage loyalist rear areas and supply lines, their positions offering multiple routes for rapid redeployment once their true allegiances were revealed. The Alpha Legion maintained their characteristic operational flexibility, with forces positioned throughout the battlefield in ways that would allow them to strike at targets of opportunity while maintaining plausible deniability for their actions. The careful coordination of these positions reflected months of planning and preparation that had anticipated exactly this tactical situation. The loyalist Primarchs remained focused on their preparations for the final assault against Horus's positions, their planning sessions reflecting confidence in their numerical superiority and the quality of their reinforcements. Ferrus continued to advocate for aggressive action that would bring the battle to a swift conclusion, his desire for vengeance against the traitor Warmaster driving him toward increasingly bold tactical proposals. The Iron Hands Primarch's emotional investment in the battle's outcome was beginning to affect his judgment in ways that more cautious commanders might have avoided. The stage was set for the greatest betrayal in human history, as loyalist and traitor forces maneuvered into positions that would determine the fate of the Imperium itself. The careful deceptions and subtle positioning that had characterized the traitor preparations were about to be revealed in a moment of treachery that would shatter the bonds of brotherhood that had held the Space Marine legions together since their creation. The Urgal Depression would soon become a killing field where the Emperor's most trusted sons would turn their weapons against each other in a conflict that would consume the galaxy in civil war. The Iron Warriors' artillery opened fire at precisely 14:27 Terran Standard, their massive guns sending shells screaming across the Urgal Depression toward the traitor positions with devastating accuracy. Perdurabo had calculated the firing solutions personally, his analytical mind identifying the optimal impact points that would maximize destruction while minimizing the risk to loyalist forces advancing through the lower approaches. The thunderous roar of the bombardment echoed across the rocky highlands as high explosive shells detonated among the bunker complexes that had sheltered Horus's defenders throughout the initial assault phase. Ferrus Manus watched the artillery barrage from his forward command position, satisfaction evident in his augmetic features as traitor strongholds disappeared in clouds of pulverized rock and twisted metal. The Iron Hands Primarch had coordinated this bombardment personally with Perdurabo, their tactical discussions focusing on the precise timing and targeting that would allow loyalist forces to exploit the chaos immediately following the initial strikes. The sight of his brother's guns systematically reducing the defensive positions that had cost so many loyalist lives filled Ferrus with grim approval. The bombardment continued for 17 minutes, each salvo carefully timed to prevent the traitors from recovering their composure between strikes. Perdurabo's gunners demonstrated the expertise that had made the Iron Warriors the Imperium's premier siege specialists, their shells finding weak points in bunker construction that conventional weapons might have failed to exploit. Secondary explosions erupted throughout the target areas as ammunition dumps and fuel storage facilities detonated, creating a cascade of destruction that exceeded even the Lord of Iron's optimistic projections. As the artillery fire lifted, Ferrus led his Morlocks in a renewed assault on the eastern approaches to the Depression, their cataphracti Terminator armor providing protection against the debris and residual fires that marked the bombardment's impact zones. The Iron Hands Primarch's necrodermis hands had reshaped themselves into massive power claws, their living metal surfaces rippling with barely contained energy as he prepared for close combat with any traitors who had survived the devastating barrage. Behind him, his elite bodyguard advanced with characteristic precision, their storm bolters already acquiring targets among the smoke-shrouded ruins. The Salamanders exploited the bombardment's success by advancing rapidly through sectors that had been cleared by the Iron Warriors' guns, their tactical squads moving with practiced efficiency through terrain that had been transformed into a moonscape of craters and rubble. Vulcan personally led the Third Company's assault on a bunker complex that had been partially collapsed by artillery fire, his thunder hammer crackling with energy as he prepared to clear any remaining defenders. The Salamander's flame weapons proved devastatingly effective in the confined spaces of damaged fortifications, their promethium charges burning away oxygen and creating conditions that made resistance impossible. Korak's coordinated reconnaissance operations that provided real-time intelligence about the bombardment's effectiveness, his Raven Guard scouts reporting the locations of surviving defensive positions, and identifying routes that advancing forces could use to avoid remaining threats. The 19th Legion's stealth capabilities allowed them to operate within the devastated landscape without alerting surviving traitors to their presence, gathering crucial information that enhanced the effectiveness of the Loyalist advance. The Primarch's tactical displays showed encouraging progress as traitor resistance began to collapse under the combined pressure of artillery fire and infantry assault. The Night Lords emerged from concealment as the bombardment ended, their midnight blue armor allowing them to blend with the shadows cast by burning wreckage and smoke clouds. Conrad Kurz led his assault companies in a series of terror attacks designed to shatter what remained of traitor morale, their skull-helmed warriors appearing like specters among the ruins as they hunted down survivors and eliminated isolated strong points. The psychological impact of the Night Lord's presence proved as devastating as their physical attacks, as traitor forces began abandoning positions rather than face the 8th Legion's reputation for extreme brutality. The word-bearers advanced through the southern approaches, with their chaplains chanting litanies that appeared to be standard Imperial prayers, but contained subtle corruptions that would have horrified loyal observers who understood their true meaning. Lorgar positioned his legion to support the Salamanders' assault while maintaining tactical flexibility for the betrayal that would soon unfold. The 17th Legion's crimson armor gleamed in the light of burning installations as they moved through terrain that had been transformed by the Iron Warriors' bombardment into a hellscape of twisted metal and shattered stone. The Alpha Legion maintained their characteristic operational security, with small teams positioned throughout the battlefield, in locations that provided maximum tactical advantage while remaining concealed from both Loyalist and traitor observation. Alfarius had distributed his forces according to predetermined plans that would allow them to strike at critical targets when the moment for betrayal arrived, their positions carefully chosen to maximize the chaos and confusion that would follow the revelation of their true allegiances. The 20th Legion's unmarked armor and equipment made them nearly indistinguishable from other Imperial forces, a camouflage that would prove crucial in the coming moments. The Loyalist advance gained momentum as the 3 primary assault legions exploited the gaps created by the Iron Warriors' bombardment, their combined operations demonstrating the tactical excellence that had made the Space Marines the Imperium's most feared military force. Ferrus pushed his iron hands deeper into the Depression's eastern sectors, their augmetic enhanced warriors proving remarkably effective at operating in the harsh conditions created by the artillery barrage. The clan companies advanced in coordinated rushes that overwhelmed scattered traitor resistance while maintaining formation integrity despite the challenging terrain. Vulcan's methodical approach proved equally effective as the Salamanders systematically cleared bunker complexes and defensive installations that had survived the bombardment. The 18th Legion's expertise in close-quarters combat served them well in the confined spaces of damaged fortifications, their flame weapons and melta charges proving devastatingly effective against defenders trapped in enclosed positions. The sight of Salamanders emerging from cleared installations, their armor scorched but intact, created a psychological impact that began to affect traitor morale throughout the southern sectors. The apparent success of the Loyalist assault masked the careful positioning that had been occurring throughout the battle, as the 4 traitor legions of the second wave maneuvered into positions that would maximize their effectiveness when they revealed their true allegiances. The Iron Warriors' artillery positions commanded not only the remaining traitor strongholds, but also the Loyalist assembly areas and supply lines, their guns capable of devastating friendly forces with the same precision they had demonstrated against Horus's defenders. Perdurabo's tactical planning had accounted for every aspect of the betrayal, positioning his forces to achieve maximum surprise while maintaining plausible operational cover. The word-bearers had deployed their forces to exploit the tactical vulnerabilities that would be created when Loyalist units became engaged in close combat with the remaining traitor defenders, their positions offering multiple routes for rapid redeployment against exposed flanks and rear areas. Lorgar's chaplains maintained their facade of ideological warfare against heresy, while preparing to reveal the true nature of their devotion to the Chaos Gods. The 17th Legion's tactical deployment reflected months of planning that had anticipated exactly this moment, with every squad positioned to maximize their effectiveness when the betrayal began. The Night Lords occupied positions that would allow them to strike at loyalist command posts and communication centers, their terror tactics ideally suited for creating the confusion and panic that would characterize the opening moments of the betrayal. Conrad Kerr's precognitive abilities had allowed him to anticipate the tactical situation with disturbing accuracy, positioning his forces to exploit weaknesses in loyalist deployments that conventional intelligence gathering might have missed. The 8th Legion's reputation for swift and decisive action would serve them well when they turned their weapons against their supposed allies. The Alpha Legion maintained their operational flexibility through careful positioning of small teams throughout the battlefield, their agents prepared to strike at targets of opportunity while maintaining the operational security that had made them the Imperium's premier specialists in unconventional warfare. Alfarius had coordinated these deployments personally, using his Legion's unique organizational structure to create multiple parallel command networks that could operate independently when the betrayal began. The 20th Legion's ability to assume false identities and operate behind enemy lines would prove crucial for maintaining the deception until the moment of maximum tactical advantage. At 1543 Terran Standard, as the Loyalist forces pressed deeper into the Urgal Depression and victory seemed within their grasp, Horus transmitted the code phrase that would transform the battle into a massacre. The single word Isstvan crackled across encrypted communication channels that connected the 4 traitor legions of the Second Wave, activating plans that had been months in preparation. The moment of ultimate betrayal had arrived, as brother prepared to turn against brother in an act of treachery that would shatter the foundations of the Imperium itself. The Iron Warriors' guns swiveled with mechanical precision, their targeting systems acquiring new coordinates that placed loyalist positions directly in their sights. Perturabo's artillery crews executed their orders with the same professional competence they had demonstrated throughout the bombardment of traitor positions, their training and discipline preventing any hesitation as they prepared to fire upon their supposed allies. The Lord of Iron watched from his command position as his warriors prepared to unleash devastation upon forces that had trusted them implicitly only moments before. The first shells from the Iron Warriors' artillery struck the Iron Hands' positions with devastating accuracy, their high explosive warheads detonating among the advancing clan companies with horrific effect. Ferrus Manus turned in shocked disbelief as his warriors were torn apart by weapons that should have been supporting their advance, his augmetic systems struggling to process the tactical impossibility of friendly fire on such a scale. The Primarch's necrodermis hands clenched into fists as the reality of betrayal began to penetrate his consciousness, rage and confusion warring within his enhanced mind. The Salamanders found themselves under attack from Word-Bearer's forces that had been advancing alongside them only moments before, Lorgar's warriors revealing their true allegiances as they opened fire on their supposed allies with bolters and heavy weapons. Vulcan's voice roared across the Vox channels as he demanded explanations for the treachery unfolding around him, his thunder hammer crackling with energy as he prepared to face enemies who had been brothers only heartbeats earlier. The 18th Legion's disciplined formations began to dissolve as they found themselves caught between the remaining traitor defenders and the Word-Bearer's assault from their flanks. Night Lord's assault squads struck at Raven Guard positions with the swift brutality that had made them infamous throughout the Great Crusade, their terror tactics proving devastatingly effective against warriors who had not expected to face such attacks from their own allies. Corax fought desperately to maintain communication with his scattered companies as Night Lord's infiltrators severed Vox links and eliminated command personnel with surgical precision. The 19th Legion's stealth capabilities proved inadequate against enemies who knew their operational methods intimately, having fought alongside them for decades during the Great Crusade. Alpha Legion teams emerged from concealment throughout the battlefield, their weapons trained on loyalist targets that had been identified and tracked throughout the battle's earlier phases. The 20th Legion's operatives struck at communication centers, supply dumps, and command posts with coordinated precision that spoke of extensive planning and preparation. Their attacks created cascading failures throughout the loyalist command structure, as officers found themselves unable to coordinate responses to the treachery unfolding around them. The loyalist forces reacted to the betrayal with shock and confusion that paralyzed their ability to respond effectively to the coordinated assault. Veterans who had fought in hundreds of battles found themselves struggling to comprehend the tactical situation as trusted allies revealed themselves as enemies, their weapons turned against warriors who had considered them brothers. The psychological impact of the betrayal proved as devastating as the physical attacks, as loyalist Marines hesitated to return fire against forces bearing the colors of allied legions. Ferrus Manus rallied his surviving Morlocks around his command position, the Primarch's rage finally overcoming his initial shock as he began to understand the scope of the treachery that had been perpetrated against the loyalist forces. The Iron Hands fought with desperate fury as they found themselves surrounded by enemies on all sides, their augmetic enhancements providing advantages that allowed them to continue fighting despite the overwhelming odds they faced. The Primarch's necrodermis hands reshaped themselves into devastating weapons as he carved through traitor Marines with mechanical precision, his fury driving him toward a confrontation with the architects of this betrayal. The Salamanders formed defensive positions among the ruins of the bunker complexes they had been clearing, Vulcan's tactical expertise, allowing him to organize a coherent response despite the chaos surrounding his forces. The 18th Legion's expertise in defensive warfare served them well as they established interlocking fields of fire that forced the word-bearers to pay heavily for every meter of ground they gained. The sight of Salamanders fighting desperately against overwhelming odds inspired acts of heroism that would be remembered for millennia. Corax attempted to coordinate a fighting withdrawal that would allow his scattered companies to regroup and establish a coherent defensive perimeter, but the Night Lord's intimate knowledge of Raven Guard tactics allowed them to anticipate and counter every maneuver. The 19th Legion found themselves being systematically hunted through terrain that offered little concealment from enemies who possessed equal expertise in stealth warfare. The Primarch's tactical displays showed his forces being eliminated piecemeal as communication networks failed and isolated squads were overwhelmed by superior numbers. The Iron Warrior's artillery continued its devastating bombardment of loyalist positions, Perdurabo's guns methodically targeting assembly areas, supply dumps, and any location where loyalist forces might attempt to organize resistance. The Lord of Iron's tactical planning proved devastatingly effective as his shells found their marks with precision that spoke of intimate knowledge of loyalist deployments and operational methods. The bombardment created a hellscape of fire and shrapnel that made coordinated movement impossible for the surviving loyalist forces. The three loyalist Primarchs found themselves fighting separate battles as the traitor assault systematically destroyed the communication networks that had allowed them to coordinate their operations. Each brother faced overwhelming odds as 4 full legions turned their weapons against forces that had been reduced by the earlier fighting and were now caught completely off guard by the betrayal. The tactical situation deteriorated rapidly as loyalist forces found themselves trapped in a killing field with no possibility of escape or reinforcement. The loyalist forces found themselves trapped in a nightmare of betrayal and death as the Iron Warrior's artillery continued its methodical destruction of their positions. Each shell that screamed overhead carried with it the bitter knowledge that these weapons had been meant to support their advance, not annihilate them. Ferrus Manus stood amid the carnage, his necrodermis hands dripping with the blood of word-bearers he had torn apart in his fury, but even his superhuman strength could not stem the tide of treachery that threatened to overwhelm his remaining forces. The Iron Hands Primarch's tactical displays flickered with damage reports that painted an increasingly desperate picture. Clan Rokon had lost 60% of its strength in the first minutes of the betrayal, their land raiders and predators reduced to burning wrecks by Iron Warriors' artillery that had targeted them with devastating precision. Clan Sogol's Devastator squads found themselves under assault from Night Lords who had infiltrated their positions during the confusion, their heavy weapons falling silent as terror tactics proved devastatingly effective against warriors who had expected support from their supposed allies. The surviving Iron Hands formed defensive clusters around whatever cover they could find, their augmetic enhancements allowing them to continue fighting despite wounds that would have incapacitated unmodified humans. Tactical squads coordinated their fire with mechanical precision, their bolters spitting death at word-bearers who advanced through the rubble-strewn approaches with fanatical determination. The sight of their Primarch fighting desperately against overwhelming odds inspired the clan brothers to acts of desperate heroism, though their sacrifices could only delay the inevitable outcome of the unequal struggle. Ferrus found himself driven deeper into the depression as Iron Warriors' shells systematically destroyed every position his forces attempted to hold. The Primarch's rage had transcended mere anger, becoming a cold fury that focused his tactical thinking with crystalline clarity despite the chaos surrounding him. His augmetic systems processed threat assessments and tactical options with superhuman speed, identifying the positions where Horus's original traitor forces had weathered the earlier bombardment. The Warmaster himself would be somewhere among those positions, coordinating the massacre of the Loyalist expedition. The knowledge that Fulgrim was likely among the traitor forces added another layer of anguish to the Iron Hands Primarch's emotional state. Intelligence reports had confirmed the Emperor's children's presence on Isstvan Five, though their exact positions remained unclear amid the chaos of battle. The thought of confronting his closest brother in combat filled Ferrus with a mixture of rage and sorrow that threatened to overwhelm even his enhanced emotional controls. Decades of friendship and shared experiences made the prospect of fighting Fulgrim almost unbearable, yet duty demanded that he set aside personal feelings in service of the Emperor's will. Vulcan's situation had become equally desperate as Word-Bearer's forces pressed their assault with fanatical intensity, their crimson armor gleaming in the light of burning wreckage as they advanced through terrain that had been transformed into a hellscape of twisted metal and shattered stone. The Salamanders' Primarch fought with his thunder-hammered Dawnbringer, the weapon's energy field crackling as it pulverized traitor Marines who had once called him brother. The 18th Legion's defensive positions among the ruined bunker complexes provided some protection, but their ammunition supplies were dwindling rapidly under the sustained assault. The Salamanders' expertise in defensive warfare allowed them to extract a heavy price from their attackers, their flame weapons proving devastatingly effective in the confined spaces of the damaged fortifications. Tactical squads coordinated their fire to create overlapping fields of death that forced the word-bearers to advance through carefully channeled approaches, their disciplined volleys cutting down traitors who exposed themselves to concentrated fire. The sight of salamanders fighting desperately against impossible odds created a psychological impact that began to affect even the fanatical word-bearers, though Lorgar's chaplains maintained their warriors' morale through constant chanting of corrupted litanies. Corax faced perhaps the most insidious threat as Night Lord's hunting packs systematically eliminated his scattered companies through terror tactics that exploited their intimate knowledge of Raven Guard operational methods. The 19th Legion's stealth capabilities proved inadequate against enemies who had fought alongside them for decades, their usual advantages in reconnaissance and infiltration neutralized by opponents who understood their techniques perfectly. The Primarch's attempts to coordinate a fighting withdrawal were frustrated by the systematic destruction of communication networks, leaving isolated squads to face overwhelming odds without support or coordination. The Raven Guard's black armor provided little concealment in the hellish landscape created by the Iron Warriors' bombardment, their usual advantages in stealth warfare negated by the fires and explosions that illuminated the battlefield with harsh light. Night Lord's assault squads struck from multiple directions simultaneously, their skull-helmed warriors appearing like specters of death among the ruins as they hunted down survivors with methodical precision. The psychological impact of facing former allies who had embraced terror as a weapon proved as devastating as the physical attacks, as Raven Guard Marines found themselves hesitating to engage enemies who bore the colors of a loyalist legion. The Iron Warrior's artillery shifted its targeting patterns to prevent any possibility of loyalist forces regrouping or establishing coherent defensive positions. Perturabo's gunners demonstrated their mastery of indirect fire as they walked their barrages through areas where loyalist survivors might attempt to rally, their shells arriving with mechanical precision that spoke of decades of experience in siege warfare. The Lord of Iron's tactical planning proved devastatingly effective as his bombardment created a moving wall of destruction that herded the surviving loyalists toward predetermined killing zones. Alpha Legion operatives emerged from concealment throughout the battlefield, their weapons trained on specific targets that had been identified and tracked throughout the battle's earlier phases. The 20th Legion's strikes against communication centers and command posts created cascading failures that prevented loyalist forces from coordinating any effective response to the betrayal. Their attacks demonstrated the extensive intelligence gathering that had preceded the ambush, as they eliminated key personnel and destroyed critical equipment with surgical precision that spoke of months of preparation. The systematic nature of the betrayal became increasingly apparent as the loyalist forces found themselves facing coordinated attacks that exploited every weakness in their tactical deployment. The four traitor legions had positioned themselves to achieve maximum surprise while maintaining overlapping fields of fire that prevented escape or regrouping. The precision of their coordination suggested extensive planning and rehearsal, with contingencies prepared for every possible loyalist response to the treachery. Ferrus recognized that conventional tactics would prove inadequate against the overwhelming odds his forces faced, but the Iron Hand's Primarch's tactical thinking had been shaped by decades of methodical warfare that emphasized superior equipment and disciplined execution over desperate heroics. His necrodermis hands reshaped themselves into configurations optimized for close combat as he prepared to lead his surviving Morlocks in a final assault against the traitor positions. The Primarch's enhanced physiology allowed him to operate effectively despite the wounds he had sustained, his augmetic systems compensating for damaged organic components while maintaining peak combat performance. The Iron Hands fought with the mechanical precision that had made them feared throughout the Great Crusade, their augmetic enhancements providing advantages that allowed them to continue fighting despite horrific casualties. Clan brothers with severed limbs continued to operate their weapons through direct neural interface, while warriors with damaged organs relied on mechanical replacements to maintain combat effectiveness. The sight of Iron Hands continuing to fight despite wounds that would have killed unaugmented humans created a psychological impact that began to affect even the fanatical word-bearers. The Salamanders' defensive positions began to crumble under the sustained assault as word-bearers' forces pressed their attacks with increasing desperation. Lorgar's warriors had taken heavy casualties in their attempts to overrun the 18th Legion's carefully prepared positions, but their fanatical devotion to their Primarch drove them forward despite the mounting losses. The word-bearers' chaplains maintained their warriors' morale through constant chanting of litanies that appeared to be standard Imperial prayers, but contained subtle corruptions that would have horrified loyal observers who understood their true meaning. Vulcan's tactical expertise allowed him to identify the critical moment when his positions would become untenable, the Salamander's Primarch recognizing that his forces faced annihilation if they remained in their current locations. The 18th Legion's ammunition supplies had been depleted by the sustained fighting, while their defensive positions showed signs of structural failure under the combined pressure of word-bearers' assault and Iron Warriors' artillery. The Primarch made the difficult decision to abandon their prepared positions and attempt a fighting withdrawal toward the Depression's center, where the original traitor forces might provide temporary shelter from the betrayal. The Night Lord's hunting packs had systematically eliminated most of the Raven Guard's scattered companies, their terror tactics proving devastatingly effective against warriors who found themselves isolated and outnumbered. Conrad Kerr's forces demonstrated their mastery of psychological warfare as they used captured Vox equipment to broadcast the screams of dying loyalists, creating an atmosphere of despair that sapped the will to resist from surviving Raven Guard Marines. The 8th Legion's reputation for extreme brutality served them well as they eliminated pockets of resistance with methodical efficiency. Corax found himself leading a dwindling band of survivors through terrain that offered little concealment from enemies who possessed equal expertise in stealth warfare. The Raven Guard Primarch's tactical displays showed his forces being eliminated piecemeal as Night Lord's assault squads struck from multiple directions simultaneously, their coordinated attacks preventing any possibility of organized resistance. The systematic nature of the hunting operation suggested extensive planning and preparation, with every possible escape route anticipated and covered by waiting ambush teams. The 3 Loyalist Primarchs began to converge on the Depression Center as their separate battles forced them toward the same general area. The tactical situation had deteriorated beyond any possibility of conventional military success, but the proximity of Horus's original positions offered the prospect of confronting the architects of this betrayal directly. Ferrus led his surviving Iron Hands toward the positions where intelligence reports suggested the Sons of Horus had established their command centers, his desire for vengeance against the traitor Warmaster overriding more cautious strategic considerations. The Emperor's Children positions became visible through the smoke and flames that shrouded the Depression's floor, their purple and gold armor gleaming despite the dust and debris that filled the air. Fulgrim's warriors had maintained their positions throughout the Loyalist assault and the subsequent betrayal, their defensive installations incorporating the artistic elements that had become their legion's signature. The sight of these positions filled Ferrus with a mixture of rage and sorrow as he recognized the perversion of craftsmanship ideals that had once bound him to his brother Fulgrim. The Iron Hands Primarch's enhanced vision detected movement among the Emperor's Children positions, his augmetic systems identifying individual figures despite the obscuring effects of smoke and dust. The distinctive silhouette of a Primarch became visible among the defensive works, the elegant proportions and graceful movement patterns unmistakably identifying Fulgrim despite the distance and poor visibility. The sight of his closest brother among the traitor forces confirmed Ferrus's worst fears about the scope of the betrayal that had been perpetrated against the Loyalist expedition. The knowledge that he would soon face Fulgrim in combat filled the Iron Hands Primarch with emotions that threatened to overwhelm his enhanced psychological conditioning. Decades of friendship and shared experiences made the prospect of fighting his brother almost unbearable, yet the evidence of treachery demanded that he set aside personal feelings in service of duty and vengeance. Ferrus's necrodermis hands clenched into fists as he prepared for a confrontation that would test not only his combat skills, but his emotional resilience in ways that no previous battle had demanded. The surviving Loyalist forces found themselves being herded toward the Depression Center by the coordinated attacks of the 4 traitor legions, their tactical options narrowing with each passing moment as escape routes were systematically eliminated. The Iron Warriors' artillery continued its devastating bombardment of any position where Loyalists might attempt to rally, while Night Lord's hunting packs eliminated isolated survivors with ruthless efficiency. The Word-Bearers pressed their assault with fanatical intensity, their crimson armor gleaming in the light of burning installations as they advanced through terrain littered with the bodies of their former brothers. The Alpha Legion maintained their operational security even as they participated in the massacre, their operatives striking at targets of opportunity while maintaining the deception that had allowed them to infiltrate Loyalist positions so effectively. The 20th Legion's ability to assume false identities and operate behind enemy lines proved crucial for maintaining confusion among the surviving Loyalists, as their attacks came from directions that should have been secure. The systematic elimination of communication networks and command personnel created a tactical situation where organized resistance became impossible. Ferrus Manus pressed forward through the chaos with single-minded determination, his surviving Morlocks forming a protective wedge around their Primarch as they fought their way toward the Emperor's children positions. The Iron Hands fought with desperate fury as they carved through word-bearers and Sons of Horus who attempted to block their advance, their augmetic enhancements providing advantages that allowed them to continue fighting despite horrific casualties. The sight of their Primarch leading them toward what appeared to be certain death inspired the clan brothers to acts of heroism that would be remembered for millennia, though few would survive to tell the tale. The Primarch's tactical systems identified the optimal route toward Fulgrim's position, his enhanced processing capabilities calculating approach vectors that would minimize exposure to defensive fire while maximizing the shock value of his assault. The Necrodermis hands had reshaped themselves into configurations optimized for the close combat that would characterize the coming confrontation, their living metal surfaces rippling with barely contained energy as they prepared for battle against another Primarch. The Iron Hands' advance gained momentum as they approached the Emperor's children positions, their desperate charge carrying them through defensive fire that would have stopped conventional forces. The Salamanders' Primarch found himself cut off from the main body of his legion, as word-bearers' assault squads pressed their attack with renewed ferocity, their crimson armor gleaming through the smoke that billowed across the depression floor. Vulcan's Thunder Hammer Dawnbringer had claimed dozens of traitor lives, but the weight of numbers was beginning to tell, as Lorgar's warriors coordinated their attacks with tactical precision that belied their apparent fanaticism. The 18th Legion's defensive positions had been systematically reduced by Iron Warriors' artillery, forcing the survivors into an increasingly desperate fighting withdrawal toward the center of the Urgal Depression. Captain Artellus Numian led the surviving elements of the Pyre Guard in a desperate attempt to reach their Primarch, the elite Terminators carving through word-bearers' positions with flamers and thunder hammers that left trails of destruction in their wake. The Salamanders had maintained their discipline despite the chaos surrounding them, their tactical squads providing covering fire, while assault units cleared obstacles that blocked their advance. The sight of their Primarch fighting alone against overwhelming odds drove the 18th Legion to acts of heroism that would have been remarkable even by Astartes standards, though their sacrifices could only delay the inevitable outcome. Vulcan's enhanced senses detected the approach of multiple Primarchs through the smoke and dust that obscured the battlefield, his gene-enhanced physiology identifying the distinctive biosignatures of his brothers despite the harsh conditions. The distinctive purple and gold of Emperor's children armor became visible through the haze, accompanied by the sea green of Sons of Horus warriors who had emerged from their fortified positions to participate in the final phase of the massacre. The Salamander's Primarch recognized that his tactical situation had become untenable, but his concern for the surviving members of his legion prevented him from attempting to disengage from the combat. The word-bearers had positioned heavy weapons teams in elevated positions that commanded the approaches to the Depression's center, their missile launchers and las cannons engaging Salamander's vehicles that attempted to provide fire support for their beleaguered infantry. Lorgar's tactical planning had anticipated the Loyalist response to the betrayal, positioning his forces to exploit the confusion and shock that would paralyze their ability to coordinate effective resistance. The 17th Legion's chaplains maintained their warriors' morale through constant chanting of litanies that contained corrupted elements designed to invoke the favor of the Chaos Gods. Captain Numian's Terminators reached Vulcan's position just as a coordinated assault by 3 word-bearers' tactical squads threatened to overwhelm the Primarch's defenses. The Pyre Guard's arrival provided crucial fire support that allowed Vulcan to disengage from close combat and assess the tactical situation more clearly. The Salamander's Primarch's enhanced vision revealed the full extent of the betrayal as he observed Iron Warriors' artillery systematically targeting Loyalist positions, while Night Lords' hunting packs eliminated isolated survivors with ruthless efficiency. The realization that 4 entire legions had turned traitor struck Vulcan with the force of a physical blow. his enhanced emotional processing, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal that had been perpetrated against the expedition. The Salamanders' Primarch had considered many of these warriors to be brothers, their shared experiences during the Great Crusade creating bonds that he had believed to be unbreakable. The systematic nature of the coordinated assault suggested months of planning and preparation, indicating that the corruption had spread far deeper than anyone on Terra had suspected. Vulcan's tactical assessment revealed that conventional military solutions would prove inadequate against the overwhelming odds his forces faced. The Salamanders had been reduced to less than 30% of their original strength, their heavy weapons and vehicles eliminated by precise artillery strikes that demonstrated intimate knowledge of their tactical deployment. The surviving warriors were running low on ammunition and medical supplies, while their defensive positions showed signs of structural failure under the sustained bombardment from Iron Warriors' guns. The Primarch made the difficult decision to authorize a general withdrawal toward the Depression's center, recognizing that his remaining forces faced annihilation if they continued to hold their current positions. The Salamanders' expertise in fighting withdrawals allowed them to execute this maneuver with characteristic discipline, their tactical squads providing covering fire, while assault units cleared obstacles and established temporary defensive positions. The sight of Vulcan personally leading the withdrawal inspired his warriors to maintain their cohesion despite the desperate nature of their situation. As the Salamanders fought their way toward the Depression's center, they encountered increasing resistance from Sons of Horus and Emperor's Children forces that had emerged from their fortified positions to participate in the final phase of the massacre. These traitor Marines demonstrated the tactical excellence that had made them feared throughout the Great Crusade, their coordinated attacks forcing the retreating Salamanders to pay heavily for every meter of ground they covered. The 16th and 3rd Legions had maintained their discipline despite their fall to chaos, their officers coordinating complex maneuvers with the precision that had characterized their operations during the Great Crusade. Vulcan found himself increasingly isolated as Word-Bearer's assault squads systematically eliminated the Salamander's warriors who formed his protective detail. Captain Numian and his remaining Terminators fought with desperate fury to maintain a corridor that would allow their Primarch to reach the relative safety of the Depression's center, but their numbers dwindled rapidly under the sustained assault. The Pyre Guard's sacrifice allowed Vulcan to continue his advance, though the cost in loyal lives filled the Primarch with grief that threatened to overwhelm his tactical thinking. The Emperor's Children positions became clearly visible as Vulcan approached the Depression Center, their elaborate defensive works incorporating artistic elements that had once represented the pinnacle of Astartes' craftsmanship. Fulgrim's warriors had maintained their positions throughout the Loyalist assault and the subsequent betrayal, their purple and gold armor unmarked by the dust and debris that covered most other forces on the battlefield. The sight of these installations filled Vulcan with a mixture of admiration and revulsion, as he recognized the perversion of aesthetic ideals that had once inspired him during his own crafting projects. The distinctive silhouette of Fulgrim himself became visible among the Emperor's Children positions, the Phoenician's elegant proportions and graceful movements unmistakable despite the distance and poor visibility. The sight of his brother among the traitor forces confirmed Vulcan's worst fears about the scope of the corruption that had infected the Space Marine legions. The knowledge that Fulgrim had embraced heresy filled the Salamander's Primarch with emotions that his enhanced psychology struggled to process, as decades of friendship and mutual respect were shattered by the evidence of betrayal. Sons of Horus tactical squads moved to intercept Vulcan's advance, their sea-green armor bearing the distinctive eye symbol that had once represented loyalty to the Emperor, but now served the Warmaster's rebellion. These warriors demonstrated the tactical excellence that had made the 16th Legion the spearhead of the Great Crusade, their coordinated attacks forcing Vulcan to fight for every step of his advance. The Sons of Horus had positioned themselves to exploit the terrain advantages offered by the Depression's rocky floor, using natural cover and prepared positions to maximize their defensive effectiveness. The Salamanders' Primarch's enhanced physiology allowed him to continue fighting despite the wounds he had sustained during the prolonged battle, his gene seed modifications providing resistance to injury and fatigue that exceeded even normal Astartes' capabilities. Vulcan's Thunder Hammer had claimed dozens of traitor lives, but the weapon's power cell was beginning to show signs of depletion after hours of continuous combat. The Primarch's tactical systems calculated that his remaining ammunition would last for perhaps another hour of sustained fighting, after which he would be forced to rely on improvised weapons and his own superhuman strength. Captain Numian's voice crackled across the Vox as the last surviving member of the Pyre Guard reported his position and status. The Terminator captain had been separated from his Primarch during the fighting withdrawal, his squad eliminated by word-bearers' assault teams that had exploited gaps in the Salamander's defensive perimeter. Numian's report painted a grim picture of the tactical situation, with loyalist forces scattered and demoralized, while traitor legions maintained their coordination and offensive momentum. The systematic elimination of Salamander's officers and specialists had disrupted the Legion's command structure to the point where organized resistance was becoming impossible. Veteran sergeants who had led their squads through hundreds of battles found themselves isolated and outnumbered, their tactical expertise rendered useless by the overwhelming odds they faced. The loss of communication equipment and medical supplies had created additional challenges that prevented the survivors from coordinating any effective response to the betrayal. Vulcan's attempts to rally his scattered forces were frustrated by the systematic destruction of Vox networks and the elimination of key personnel who might have served as focal points for reorganization. The word-bearers had demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Salamander's tactical doctrine, targeting specific individuals and equipment that would maximize the disruption to the 18th Legion's operational effectiveness. This intimate knowledge of loyalist capabilities suggested that the planning for the betrayal had included detailed intelligence gathering about each Legion's strengths and vulnerabilities. The Primarch found himself facing a coordinated assault by multiple sons of Horus tactical squads, their bolters spitting death as they advanced through the rocky terrain with practiced precision. Vulcan's enhanced reflexes allowed him to dodge most of the incoming fire, but several rounds found their mark despite his superhuman agility. The Primarch's armor showed signs of damage from the sustained combat, its ceramic plate scarred by Law's bolt impacts and shrapnel from nearby explosions. As Vulcan fought his way deeper into the depression, he encountered increasing numbers of Emperor's Children warriors who had emerged from their defensive positions to participate in the massacre. These traitors demonstrated the tactical excellence that had once made them the pride of the Third Legion, their coordinated attacks forcing the Salamander's Primarch to fight for every meter of advance. The Emperor's Children had maintained their discipline despite their fall to chaos, their officers coordinating complex maneuvers with the precision that had characterized their operations during the Great Crusade. The sight of Fulgrim directing his warriors from an elevated position filled Vulcan with a mixture of rage and sorrow that threatened to overwhelm his enhanced emotional controls. The Phoenician's elegant movements and perfect coordination suggested that his corruption had not diminished his tactical capabilities, though the Salamander's Primarch could detect subtle changes in his brother's behavior that spoke of deeper transformation. The knowledge that he might soon face Fulgrim in combat filled Vulcan with dread, as he understood that such a confrontation could only end in tragedy regardless of its outcome. Sons of Horus assault squads moved to flank Vulcan's position, their tactical deployment demonstrating the sophisticated planning that had characterized the entire betrayal. These warriors had positioned themselves to exploit the terrain advantages offered by the depression's rocky floor, using natural cover and prepared positions to maximize their effectiveness, while minimizing their exposure to the Primarch's devastating counterattacks. The 16th Legion's expertise in combined arms operations was clearly evident in their coordination with supporting elements from other traitor legions. The Salamander's Primarch's enhanced senses detected the approach of additional enemy forces through the smoke and dust that obscured the battlefield. His gene-enhanced physiology, identifying the distinctive biosignatures of Astartes warriors despite the harsh conditions. Word-bearers' tactical squads were moving to cut off his line of retreat, while Emperor's Children assault teams prepared to engage him from multiple directions simultaneously. The tactical situation had deteriorated to the point where escape seemed impossible, but Vulcan's concern for his surviving warriors prevented him from abandoning the field, while any Salamanders remained alive. The systematic nature of the traitor assault became increasingly apparent as Vulcan observed the coordination between different Legion elements. Iron Warriors' artillery continued to target areas where Loyalist survivors might attempt to rally, while Night Lords' hunting packs eliminated isolated individuals with ruthless efficiency. The four traitor legions had demonstrated tactical integration that spoke of extensive joint training and preparation, their operations coordinated through communication networks that had remained intact throughout the battle. Vulcan's tactical systems identified several sons of Horus officers among the forces arrayed against him, their distinctive armor markings and equipment indicating veteran status within the 16th Legion's hierarchy. These warriors had fought alongside the Salamanders during numerous campaigns throughout the Great Crusade, their intimate knowledge of the 18th Legion's tactical doctrine, allowing them to anticipate and counter Vulcan's likely responses to their assault. The personal nature of this betrayal added another layer of anguish to the Primarch's emotional state as he prepared to face enemies who had once been trusted allies. The Emperor's Children positions showed signs of recent modification, their defensive works incorporating new elements that suggested preparation for exactly this type of engagement. Fulgrim's warriors had clearly spent considerable time and effort preparing for the confrontation with their Loyalist brothers, their installations designed to channel attacking forces into predetermined killing zones while providing maximum protection for defending troops. The artistic elements that decorated these positions served tactical purposes as well as aesthetic ones, with sculptural gun emplacements and decoratively carved firing slits that provided both concealment and psychological impact. As the traitor forces closed in around him, Vulcan made a desperate decision that would determine not only his own fate, but the survival of any remaining Salamanders in the area. The Primarch activated his Legion's emergency evacuation protocols, broadcasting orders for all surviving warriors to attempt immediate extraction, while he provided covering fire and distraction. This sacrifice would likely result in his own capture or death, but it offered the only hope for preserving some remnant of the 18th Legion for future operations against the traitor forces. The Salamanders who received these orders responded with characteristic discipline despite their desperate situation, their tactical squads attempting to disengage from combat while maintaining some semblance of unit cohesion. The survivors faced overwhelming odds as they fought their way toward potential extraction points, their progress marked by the bodies of brothers who fell to ensure that others might escape the massacre. The sight of Salamanders sacrificing themselves for their comrades created a psychological impact that affected even the hardened traitor Marines who witnessed these acts of heroism. Vulcan's final stand became the focal point for the traitor assault as sons of Horus, Emperor's Children, and Word-bearers' forces converged on his position with overwhelming numbers. The Primarch fought with the fury of a cornered giant, his thunder hammer claiming lives with every swing, while his enhanced physiology allowed him to continue fighting despite wounds that would have felled lesser beings. The sight of a Primarch fighting desperately against impossible odds created a spectacle that drew warriors from across the battlefield, their desire to claim such a prize overriding tactical considerations. The coordinated assault on Vulcan's position demonstrated the tactical excellence that had made these legions feared throughout the Great Crusade, their officers coordinating complex maneuvers with precision that spoke of extensive training and preparation. The traitor forces had positioned themselves to exploit every advantage offered by the terrain and their numerical superiority, their attacks coming from multiple directions simultaneously to prevent the Primarch from focusing his defensive efforts effectively. The systematic nature of their assault suggested that specific plans had been developed for engaging each loyalist Primarch individually. Meanwhile, on the northern rim of the Urgal Depression, Corax had managed to rally the scattered remnants of his legion into a coherent fighting force, despite the systematic hunting efforts of the Night Lords. The Raven Guard Primarch's tactical genius had allowed him to identify weaknesses in the traitor deployment that conventional observation might have missed. His enhanced analytical capabilities, processing information from multiple sources to develop a comprehensive understanding of the battlefield situation. The 19th Legion's expertise in stealth warfare had proven crucial for avoiding the worst effects of the betrayal, though their losses remained catastrophic. The Raven Guard had established temporary defensive positions among the rocky outcroppings that dotted the depression's rim, their black armor providing excellent camouflage against the shadows cast by burning wreckage and smoke clouds. Corax had positioned his surviving companies to maximize their advantages in mobility and firepower, while minimizing their exposure to the Iron Warriors' artillery that continued to target areas where Loyalist forces might attempt to regroup. The Primarch's tactical planning emphasized the importance of maintaining unit cohesion while preparing for an organized withdrawal from the killing field. Captain Aloni Tev led the surviving elements of the Mordathan in reconnaissance operations that provided crucial intelligence about traitor dispositions and movement patterns. These specialist units had maintained their operational effectiveness despite the chaos surrounding them, their stealth equipment and training allowing them to gather information that would be essential for planning any attempt at extraction. The sight of Raven Guard scouts moving through terrain that should have been dominated by enemy forces provided hope for the survivors who had begun to despair of escape. Corax's enhanced vision had detected the systematic elimination of Salamanders' forces in the Depression's southern sectors, his gene-enhanced senses allowing him to observe the coordinated assault on Vulcan's position despite the distance and poor visibility. The Raven Guard Primarch understood that his brother faced overwhelming odds with little hope of survival, but the tactical situation prevented any attempt at providing support. The knowledge that he might be witnessing the death of another Primarch filled Corax with rage that threatened to override his tactical judgment. The Night Lord's hunting packs had adapted their tactics to counter the Raven Guard's stealth capabilities, their own expertise in terror warfare allowing them to anticipate and counter many of the 19th Legion's standard operational methods. Conrad Kerr's warriors had positioned themselves to exploit the psychological impact of their reputation, using captured Vox equipment to broadcast the screams of dying loyalists in an attempt to demoralize surviving Raven Guard Marines. The 8th Legion's systematic approach to psychological warfare demonstrated their understanding of the factors that influenced Astartes' morale and combat effectiveness. The Raven Guard's ammunition supplies had been severely depleted by the prolonged fighting, their tactical squads forced to conserve rounds while maintaining defensive fires against probing attacks by Night Lord's assault teams. Corax had implemented strict fire discipline protocols that maximized the effectiveness of their remaining munitions, while ensuring that each squad retained sufficient ammunition for a fighting withdrawal. The Primarch's tactical systems calculated that his forces could maintain their current defensive posture for perhaps another 2 hours before being forced to abandon their positions. The systematic destruction of Loyalist communication networks had created additional challenges for coordinating any organized response to the betrayal. Corax found himself unable to establish contact with either Ferrus or Vulcan, his attempts to coordinate joint operations frustrated by the elimination of key relay stations and the jamming of remaining Vox channels. The isolation of each Loyalist force had been a deliberate element of the traitor strategy, preventing the Primarchs from combining their remaining strength for a coordinated counterattack. The Iron Warriors' artillery had shifted its targeting patterns to focus on areas where Raven Guard survivors might attempt to establish rally points, Perturabo's gunners demonstrating their mastery of indirect fire as they walked their barrages through suspected positions with mechanical precision. The Lord of Iron's tactical planning had anticipated the likely responses of each loyalist legion to the betrayal, positioning his guns to maximize their effectiveness against forces attempting to regroup or coordinate resistance efforts. Corax recognized that conventional military solutions would prove inadequate against the overwhelming odds his forces faced, but the Raven Guard Primarch's experience during the liberation of Deliverance had taught him that superior tactics could overcome significant disadvantages in numbers and equipment. The 19th Legion's expertise in guerrilla warfare and fighting withdrawals provided options that might allow at least some survivors to escape the massacre, though such operations would require sacrificing the majority of his remaining forces to ensure that a core of veterans could carry word of the betrayal back to Terra. The Primarch's tactical assessment identified several potential extraction routes that might allow small groups of Raven Guard to escape the Isstvan system, though reaching these positions would require fighting through multiple layers of traitor forces while avoiding the systematic bombardment that continued to target loyalist movements. The success of such operations would depend on maintaining operational security while coordinating complex maneuvers across terrain that offered little concealment from enemy observation. The psychological impact of abandoning the battlefield while his brothers faced annihilation created additional challenges that Corax's enhanced emotional controls struggled to process. The systematic hunting of loyalist survivors began within minutes of the initial betrayal, as traitor forces deployed across the Urgal Depression with methodical precision that spoke of extensive preparation. Iron Warriors' tactical squads moved through the rubble-strewn landscape like mechanical predators, their augmetic sensors scanning for the heat signatures and bio-readings that would betray hidden loyalists. The 4th Legion's expertise in siege warfare had taught them to clear fortified positions with thoroughness that left no hiding place unexplored, and they applied these same principles to the grim task of eliminating survivors who might escape to carry word of the massacre back to Terra. Perturabo coordinated the hunting operations from his elevated command position, the Lord of Iron's analytical mind processing tactical data with the same cold efficiency he had once applied to reducing enemy strongholds. His battle cant directives reached every Iron Warriors unit across the battlefield, their encrypted communications ensuring that no sector remained uncovered while preventing loyalist survivors from intercepting intelligence about the search patterns. The Primarch's tactical displays showed the methodical progress of his forces as they eliminated pockets of resistance and sealed potential escape routes with overlapping fields of fire. The Word-bearers had assumed responsibility for the Depression's southern sectors, their crimson-armored squads advancing through terrain that had been transformed into a hellscape of twisted metal and burning wreckage. Lorgar's warriors demonstrated the same fanatical determination that had characterized their assault on the Salamanders' positions, their chaplains chanting corrupted litanies that invoked the favor of the Chaos Gods, while maintaining their troops' morale for the unpleasant work ahead. The 17th Legion's expertise in ideological warfare proved valuable for identifying loyalists who might attempt to blend in with traitor forces or civilian populations. Night Lords' hunting packs had dispersed throughout the northern approaches, their terror tactics proving devastatingly effective against isolated survivors who lacked the numbers or coordination to mount organized resistance. Conrad Kerr's warriors moved through the shadows cast by burning installations like specters of death, their skull-helmed visages creating psychological impact that often proved as deadly as their weapons. The 8th Legion's reputation for extreme brutality served them well in this phase of the operation, as many loyalists chose to fight to the death rather than risk capture by forces known for their creative approaches to interrogation. Alpha Legion operatives had integrated themselves throughout the battlefield, their unmarked armor and operational security protocols allowing them to operate among both loyalist and traitor forces without detection. The 20th Legion's expertise in infiltration and intelligence gathering made them invaluable for identifying loyalist survivors who might possess crucial information about Imperial defensive plans or the locations of other loyal forces. Their systematic approach to prisoner screening ensured that no potentially valuable intelligence asset escaped elimination or extraction. The coordination between the four traitor legions demonstrated tactical integration that exceeded anything they had achieved during the Great Crusade, their operations synchronized through communication networks that had been established specifically for this phase of the massacre. Each legion brought specialized capabilities that complemented the others, creating a comprehensive dragnet that left few opportunities for loyalist survivors to escape detection. The systematic nature of their cooperation suggested months of joint planning and rehearsal, with contingencies prepared for every possible scenario that might develop during the aftermath of the betrayal. Iron Warriors' Devastator squads had established overwatch positions throughout the highlands surrounding the Depression, their heavy weapons trained on potential extraction points, where loyalist survivors might attempt to reach orbital assets or hidden supply caches. The 4th Legion's missile launchers and las cannons provided precision fire support that could eliminate individual targets at extreme range. Their targeting systems slaved to centralized fire control networks that coordinated defensive fires across the entire operational area. The sight of these weapons systematically engaging fleeing loyalists created a psychological impact that discouraged other survivors from attempting similar escapes. The traitor forces had positioned blocking detachments at every major egress route from the Depression, their tactical deployment preventing loyalist survivors from reaching the landing zones where Thunderhawks and other aircraft might provide extraction opportunities. Wordbearers' tactical squads occupied the southern approaches, while Night Lords' assault teams controlled the northern sectors, their overlapping fields of observation ensuring that no movement went undetected. The Alpha Legion had infiltrated the eastern approaches with small teams that could call down artillery strikes or coordinate ambushes against survivors who attempted to break through the containment perimeter. Salamanders' survivors found themselves facing particularly brutal treatment from Wordbearers' forces that had taken heavy casualties during the earlier fighting. Lorger's warriors demonstrating the vindictive nature that had characterized their transformation from loyal servants of the Imperial truth into devoted worshippers of chaos. The 17th Legion's chaplains conducted impromptu executions that incorporated ritual elements designed to invoke the favor of their dark patrons, their ceremonies serving both practical and spiritual purposes within their corrupted belief system. The systematic nature of these killings suggested that specific instructions had been provided for dealing with prisoners from each loyalist legion. Captain Artellus Numian had managed to gather a small group of Salamanders survivors in a defensive position among the ruins of a bunker complex that had been partially collapsed by Iron Warriors' artillery. The Pyre Guard veteran's tactical expertise allowed him to identify cover that provided protection from direct fire while offering multiple escape routes if their position became untenable. The Salamanders under his command maintained their discipline despite the desperate nature of their situation, their flame weapons providing effective close-range firepower against Wordbearers' assault teams that attempted to overrun their position. The systematic elimination of Salamanders' officers and specialists had disrupted the 18th Legion's command structure to the point where organized resistance required extraordinary leadership from surviving veterans. Numian's small force represented one of the few coherent units that remained operational, their tactical coordination allowing them to hold their position against repeated assaults while conserving ammunition and medical supplies. The captain's enhanced senses detected the approach of additional enemy forces through the smoke and debris that obscured the battlefield, his gene-enhanced physiology identifying the distinctive biosignatures of Astartes' warriors despite the harsh conditions. Wordbearers' tactical squads had surrounded the Salamanders' position with methodical precision, their deployment preventing escape while maintaining sufficient standoff distance to avoid the devastating effects of flame weapons in close combat. Lorger's warriors demonstrated patience that contradicted their earlier fanatical assaults, their officers coordinating siege tactics that would reduce the loyalist stronghold without exposing their own forces to unnecessary casualties. The 17th Legion's expertise in attrition warfare was clearly evident in their tactical deployment, as they positioned heavy weapons and support elements to maintain sustained pressure on the defenders. The Iron Hands survivors faced equally systematic hunting by Iron Warriors forces that possessed intimate knowledge of their tactical doctrine and equipment capabilities. Perdurabo's warriors had identified the locations where clan companies might attempt to establish rally points, their artillery strikes eliminating these positions before significant numbers of loyalists could gather. The 4th Legion's methodical approach to siege warfare translated effectively to the task of eliminating scattered survivors, their tactical squads advancing through the battlefield with mechanical precision that left no hiding place unexplored. Clan Raukon's surviving vehicles had been systematically targeted by Iron Warriors' anti-tank teams that possessed detailed knowledge of their armor configurations and tactical employment. The 10th Legion's land raiders and predators had been reduced to burning wrecks through coordinated attacks that exploited specific vulnerabilities in their defensive systems, their crews eliminated by precision strikes that prevented any possibility of recovery or repair. The sight of Iron Hands' armor burning throughout the Depression created a psychological impact that affected the morale of surviving loyalists who had relied on these vehicles for fire support and mobility. The few Iron Hands survivors who had managed to escape the initial massacre found themselves facing enemies who understood their augmetic capabilities and tactical preferences with disturbing accuracy. Iron Warriors' assault teams had prepared specific countermeasures for dealing with heavily augmented opponents, their weapons and tactics designed to exploit the weaknesses that accompanied cybernetic enhancement. The systematic nature of these preparations suggested that detailed intelligence about Iron Hands' capabilities had been gathered and analyzed during the months of planning that preceded the betrayal. Raven Guard survivors demonstrated their Legion's expertise in stealth warfare as they attempted to evade the Night Lord's hunting packs that prowled through the northern sectors of the battlefield. Korax had managed to extract several companies of his warriors from the immediate combat zone, their black armor and specialized equipment providing advantages in the smoke-shrouded landscape that had been created by the ongoing fires and explosions. The 19th Legion's training in guerrilla warfare served them well as they attempted to establish secure positions while avoiding the systematic searches being conducted by their former allies. The Night Lords had adapted their hunting tactics to counter the Raven Guard's advantages in stealth and mobility, their own expertise in terror warfare, allowing them to anticipate and intercept loyalist movement patterns. Conrad Kerr's warriors used psychological warfare techniques that exploited their intimate knowledge of Raven Guard operational methods, their terror tactics proving effective against opponents who had expected to face conventional enemies rather than specialists in fear and intimidation. The 8th Legion's systematic approach to hunting demonstrated their understanding of the factors that influenced Astartes' behavior under extreme stress. Captain Aloni Tev had managed to maintain operational security for his more Dathan specialists, despite the systematic efforts to eliminate Raven Guard reconnaissance assets. The elite unit's stealth capabilities had allowed them to avoid detection while gathering intelligence about traitor dispositions and movement patterns, their observations providing crucial information for any loyalist survivors who might attempt to coordinate resistance efforts. The captain's enhanced senses detected the approach of Night Lords hunting packs through terrain that should have provided concealment, his gene-enhanced physiology identifying the distinctive biosignatures of Astartes' warriors despite their stealth equipment. The Alpha Legion's infiltration operations had created additional challenges for loyalist survivors who might otherwise have attempted to coordinate resistance efforts or plan escape routes. The 20th Legion's operatives had assumed false identities that allowed them to operate among both loyalist and traitor forces, their presence creating uncertainty about which Imperial units could be trusted. The systematic nature of their deception operations suggested extensive preparation and coordination, with contingencies prepared for maintaining their cover regardless of how the tactical situation developed. Horus himself had emerged from his command bunker to observe the final phases of the massacre, the Warmaster's enhanced senses allowing him to assess the tactical situation with superhuman clarity despite the smoke and chaos that obscured the battlefield. The 16th Legion's Primarch demonstrated the charismatic leadership that had made him the Emperor's chosen successor, his presence on the battlefield inspiring his warriors to greater efforts while coordinating the complex operations required to eliminate all Loyalist survivors. The sight of the Warmaster directing the systematic slaughter of his former brothers created a psychological impact that affected even the hardened traitor Marines who witnessed his transformation. The Sons of Horus had assumed responsibility for securing the Depression's central areas, their sea-green armor easily identifiable among the rocky terrain as they moved between positions that had been fortified during the earlier phases of the battle. The 16th Legion maintained their tactical excellence despite their fall to chaos, their officers coordinating complex maneuvers with the precision that had characterized their operations during the Great Crusade. The systematic nature of their deployment suggested that specific plans had been developed for controlling the battlefield's most critical terrain features. Emperor's Children forces had maintained their positions throughout the massacre, their purple and gold armor unmarked by the dust and debris that covered most other forces on the battlefield. Fulgrim's warriors demonstrated the tactical discipline that had once made them the pride of the 3rd Legion, their coordinated movements reflecting the aesthetic principles that had guided their martial philosophy. The sight of Emperor's Children maintaining perfect formation while participating in the slaughter of their former brothers created a disturbing contrast that emphasized the depth of their corruption. The Death Guard had emerged from their defensive positions to participate in the final phases of the massacre, their pale green armor and Baroque equipment creating an ominous presence among the rocky outcroppings of the Depression floor. Mortarian's warriors brought their expertise in attrition warfare to bear against Loyalist survivors, their chemical weapons and biological agents making resistance impossible for defenders trapped in enclosed spaces. The 14th Legion's methodical approach to eliminating enemies complemented the more aggressive tactics employed by other traitor forces. World Eater's assault squads prowled through the battlefield, seeking opportunities for close combat with any Loyalist survivors who might attempt organized resistance. Angron's warriors showed little interest in the systematic hunting operations being conducted by other traitor legions, their berserker implants driving them toward immediate violence rather than the patient work of eliminating scattered survivors. The 12th Legion's presence created additional psychological pressure on Loyalist forces who understood that capture by World Eaters would result in particularly brutal treatment. The coordination between traitor legion elements demonstrated tactical integration that had been achieved through extensive joint training and preparation. Communication networks that had been established specifically for this operation allowed the various forces to coordinate their activities while maintaining operational security against potential Loyalist interception. The systematic nature of their cooperation suggested that detailed contingency plans had been developed for every phase of the massacre, with specific roles assigned to each legion based on their specialized capabilities. Iron Warrior's artillery continued to target areas where Loyalist survivors might attempt to establish rally points or coordinate resistance efforts. Perdurabo's gunners had shifted their fire patterns to focus on precision strikes against individual targets rather than the area bombardments that had characterized the earlier phases of the battle. The 4th Legion's mastery of indirect fire allowed them to engage fleeing Loyalists at extreme range while avoiding the risk of friendly fire incidents that might affect traitor forces operating in the same areas. The systematic elimination of Loyalist communication equipment had created additional challenges for survivors who might otherwise have attempted to coordinate escape efforts or call for extraction. Word-bearers specialists had identified and destroyed Vox, relay stations, and communication arrays throughout the battlefield, their technical expertise allowing them to locate equipment that conventional searches might have missed. The loss of communication capabilities prevented Loyalist survivors from coordinating their activities or calling for support from orbital assets that might have provided extraction opportunities. Night Lord's terror tactics had proven particularly effective against isolated Loyalist survivors who lacked the numbers or coordination to mount organized resistance. The 8th Legion's reputation for extreme brutality created psychological pressure that often proved as deadly as their weapons, with many Loyalists choosing to fight to the death rather than risk capture by forces known for their creative approaches to interrogation. The systematic nature of their hunting operations demonstrated their understanding of the psychological factors that influenced Astartes' behavior under extreme stress. The Alpha Legion had established checkpoints and observation posts throughout the battlefield, their operatives screening potential survivors for intelligence value while maintaining the operational security that had characterized their involvement in the betrayal. The 20th Legion's expertise in prisoner interrogation and intelligence analysis made them valuable assets for identifying Loyalists who might possess crucial information about Imperial defensive plans or the locations of other loyal forces. Their systematic approach to processing captured personnel ensured that no potentially valuable intelligence was overlooked. The few Loyalist survivors who had managed to avoid immediate detection found themselves facing increasingly desperate circumstances as their ammunition and medical supplies dwindled under the sustained pressure of the hunting operations. Isolated squads and individual Marines attempted to reach potential extraction points while avoiding the systematic searches being conducted throughout the battlefield, their movements tracked by traitor forces that possessed detailed knowledge of their tactical doctrine and likely responses to the betrayal. Salamanders survivors under Captain Numian's command had managed to maintain their defensive position despite repeated assaults by Word-Bearer's forces, their flame weapons providing effective close-range firepower against enemies who attempted to overrun their stronghold. The captain's tactical expertise had allowed him to identify defensive positions that maximized his force's advantages while conserving ammunition and medical supplies for the prolonged siege that appeared inevitable. The sight of Salamanders continuing to resist despite overwhelming odds created a psychological impact that began to affect the morale of attacking Word-Bearer's units. The systematic nature of the traitor hunting operations reflected the extensive planning and preparation that had preceded the betrayal, with specific procedures developed for dealing with survivors from each Loyalist legion. The 4 traitor legions had demonstrated tactical coordination that exceeded anything they had achieved during joint operations throughout the Great Crusade, their activities synchronized through communication networks and command structures that had been established specifically for this phase of the massacre. The smoking ruins of the Urgal Depression bore witness to the greatest catastrophe in Imperial history as the last echoes of bolter fire faded into the ash-choked air. Where 3 full Space Marine legions had descended with righteous purpose, only scattered remnants remained to tell the tale of ultimate betrayal. The strategic consequences of the Isstvan Five massacre would reverberate throughout the galaxy for the remainder of the Horus Heresy, fundamentally altering the balance of power between Loyalist and traitor forces in ways that would determine the fate of humanity itself. The Emperor's grand design for the reconquest of the galaxy lay in ruins, alongside the bodies of his most loyal sons. The loss of Ferrus Manus represented more than the death of a single Primarch. It shattered the Iron Hands Legion's command structure and eliminated one of the Imperium's most capable military leaders at the moment when his expertise was most desperately needed. The 10th Legion's clan-based organization, which had provided tactical flexibility during the Great Crusade, now became a liability as individual clans found themselves isolated and leaderless in the aftermath of their Primarch's death. The systematic destruction of 3 Loyalist legions had removed nearly 200,000 Space Marines from the Emperor's order of battle, representing a loss of combat power that could not be replaced within any reasonable timeframe. The Imperium's ability to conduct large-scale offensive operations against the traitor forces had been crippled, forcing a shift from aggressive campaigns to desperate defensive measures that would characterize the remainder of the Civil War. The strategic initiative had passed irrevocably to Horus and his allies, who could now dictate the tempo and location of future engagements. Captain Artellus Numian emerged from the ruins of the bunker complex where he had made his final stand, his armor scarred by Law's bolt impacts and his flame weapon depleted of promethium. The Salamanders' captain had witnessed the systematic slaughter of his legion, watching as Word-Bearer's forces eliminated isolated pockets of resistance with methodical precision. The handful of survivors under his command represented a fraction of the 18th Legion's original strength, their faces bearing the haunted expressions of warriors who had seen their brotherhood shattered by ultimate betrayal. The psychological trauma inflicted upon the surviving Salamanders would prove as devastating as their physical losses. Warriors who had spent decades building bonds of trust with their fellow legions now faced the reality that 4 of their brother legions had turned traitor, transforming the galaxy into a battlefield where no alliance could be trusted completely. The systematic nature of the betrayal had demonstrated that corruption could spread through the Space Marine legions despite their genetic conditioning and psychological indoctrination, creating doubts about the reliability of any Imperial force. Numian's tactical assessment revealed the full scope of the disaster that had befallen the Loyalist expedition. The Salamanders had lost their entire fleet train, including forged ships and supply vessels that contained irreplaceable equipment and technical expertise. The Legion's recruitment and training facilities on Nocturne remained intact, but the loss of veteran sergeants and specialist personnel would require decades to replace. The survivors faced the grim prospect of rebuilding their legion from scattered remnants while fighting a galaxy spanning civil war against enemies who possessed overwhelming numerical superiority. The Iron Hands had suffered even more catastrophic losses, with entire clan companies eliminated during the initial betrayal and subsequent hunting operations. The 10th Legion's extensive use of augmetic implants had made their warriors particularly vulnerable to Iron Warriors weapons designed specifically to counter cybernetic enhancement, resulting in casualty rates that exceeded even the most pessimistic projections. The survivors found themselves scattered across multiple star systems, their communication networks shattered, and their command structure in complete disarray. Clan Raukon's few surviving vehicles had been abandoned on Isstvan Five, their crews either dead or missing, as the remnants of the Legion attempted to escape the systematic hunting operations. The loss of these irreplaceable assets represented more than mere equipment failure. It eliminated the tactical mobility that had made the Iron Hands effective in combined arms operations. The clan companies that managed to escape the massacre faced the prospect of rebuilding their strength without the technical expertise and manufacturing capabilities that had once made them the Imperium's premier mechanized force. The systematic elimination of Iron Hands' technical specialists had created additional challenges for the Legion's recovery efforts. These warriors had possessed knowledge of advanced augmetic procedures and equipment maintenance that could not be easily replaced, their expertise representing centuries of accumulated experience in cybernetic enhancement. The loss of this institutional knowledge would force the surviving Iron Hands to rely on mechanicum support for procedures they had once performed independently, creating dependencies that would limit their operational flexibility. Corax had managed to extract approximately 3,000 Raven Guard from the Massacre, their stealth capabilities, and his tactical genius allowing them to evade the systematic hunting operations that had eliminated most other Loyalist survivors. The 19th Legion's expertise in guerrilla warfare had served them well during the chaotic aftermath of the betrayal, though their losses still represented a catastrophic reduction in combat strength. The survivors faced the daunting task of rebuilding their legion while conducting covert operations against traitor forces that now controlled vast swaths of Imperial territory. The Raven Guard's escape from Isstvan Five had been purchased with the sacrifice of hundreds of warriors who had volunteered for rear guard actions that allowed their brothers to reach extraction points. These heroes had fought desperate delaying actions against overwhelming odds, their deaths providing the time necessary for the main body of survivors to break through the traitor containment perimeter. The psychological impact of these sacrifices would haunt the surviving Raven Guard for years to come, creating a burden of survivors' guilt that affected their combat effectiveness and morale. The intelligence gathered by Raven Guard reconnaissance teams during the massacre provided crucial information about the scope of the betrayal and the capabilities of the traitor forces. Corax's warriors had observed the coordination between the 4 traitor legions, documenting tactical procedures and communication protocols that would prove valuable for future operations against these enemies. This intelligence represented one of the few positive outcomes of the disaster, providing Imperial forces with detailed information about traitor capabilities and intentions. The strategic implications of the massacre extended far beyond the immediate military losses, fundamentally altering the political and psychological landscape of the Imperium. The revelation that 4 additional legions had embraced heresy created doubts about the loyalty of every Imperial institution, forcing commanders throughout the galaxy to implement security measures that diverted resources from offensive operations. The systematic nature of the betrayal had demonstrated that corruption could spread through the most trusted elements of the Imperial military, creating paranoia that would plague loyalist forces throughout the remainder of the Civil War. Horus's position had been immeasurably strengthened by the success of the Isstvan Five massacre, providing him with a decisive victory that validated his rebellion in the eyes of potential supporters throughout the galaxy. The Warmaster now commanded 8 full Space Marine legions, representing a concentration of military power that exceeded anything the Emperor could field in direct confrontation. The systematic elimination of 3 loyalist legions had removed the immediate threat to his power base, while demonstrating the futility of resistance to his rebellion. The traitor forces had emerged from the massacre with their strength largely intact, having suffered minimal casualties during the systematic slaughter of their former brothers. The Iron Warriors, Word-Bearers, Night Lords, and Alpha Legion had proven their value as allies through their coordinated betrayal, earning positions of trust within Horus's expanding coalition. The success of their deception had validated the Warmaster's strategic planning while providing a template for future operations against loyalist forces. The psychological impact of the betrayal had been as devastating as the physical destruction, shattering the bonds of brotherhood that had held the Space Marine legions together since their creation. Warriors who had fought side by side for decades now faced each other across battle lines, their shared experiences transformed from sources of strength into painful reminders of what had been lost. The systematic nature of the betrayal had demonstrated that no relationship could be trusted completely, creating an atmosphere of suspicion that would plague both loyalist and traitor forces throughout the remainder of the Civil War. The Emperor's response to news of the massacre reflected the magnitude of the disaster that had befallen his forces. The Master of Mankind had lost not only 3 full legions, but also one of his most trusted sons, representing a blow to Imperial capabilities that could not be easily overcome. The strategic initiative had passed to the traitor forces, forcing the Emperor to abandon his offensive plans and focus on defensive measures that might preserve the core territories of the Imperium. The loss of Ferrus Manus had eliminated one of the few Primarchs who possessed both the tactical expertise and personal loyalty necessary to serve as a field commander for major operations against the traitor forces. The Iron Hands Primarch's death had created a gap in the Imperial command structure that could not be filled by any single individual, forcing the Emperor to rely on a committee approach to strategic planning that lacked the decisive leadership that had characterized the Great Crusade. The systematic destruction of loyalist fleet assets during the massacre had crippled the Imperium's ability to project power across interstellar distances. The loss of hundreds of warships, transport vessels, and support craft represented a reduction in naval capabilities that would require years to replace. The traitor forces now possessed naval superiority in multiple sectors, allowing them to dictate the terms of engagement while preventing loyalist forces from coordinating large-scale operations. The march toward Terra had begun in earnest as Horus consolidated his position and prepared for the next phase of his rebellion. The Warmaster's forces now controlled a secure base of operations within the Segmentum Solar, providing them with access to the warp routes that led directly to the Imperial throne world. The systematic elimination of loyalist opposition in the Isstvan system had removed the primary obstacle to traitor expansion, opening multiple avenues of advance that would force the Emperor to divide his remaining forces. The traitor legions had demonstrated tactical capabilities that exceeded their previous performance during joint operations, their coordination during the Massacre revealing the extent of their preparation and planning. The Iron Warriors, Word Bearers, Night Lords, and Alpha Legion had proven their reliability as allies while contributing specialized capabilities that enhanced the overall effectiveness of Horus's forces. The success of their betrayal had validated the Warmaster's strategy of corrupting entire legions rather than attempting to recruit individual warriors. The psychological warfare implications of the Massacre would prove as significant as its immediate military consequences. The systematic slaughter of loyalist forces had created a climate of fear and uncertainty that affected Imperial morale throughout the galaxy. Worlds that had remained loyal to the Emperor now faced the prospect of traitor reprisals, while Imperial commanders struggled to maintain unit cohesion in the face of doubts about the reliability of their allies. The Alpha Legion's infiltration operations had created additional challenges for loyalist forces attempting to coordinate resistance efforts. The 20th Legion's operatives had demonstrated their ability to maintain false identities while operating among Imperial forces, creating uncertainty about which units could be trusted. The systematic nature of their deception operations had forced loyalist commanders to implement security measures that reduced operational efficiency while diverting resources from combat operations. The Night Lord's terror tactics had proven devastatingly effective against loyalist survivors, their reputation for extreme brutality creating psychological pressure that often proved as deadly as their weapons. The 8th Legion's systematic approach to psychological warfare had demonstrated their understanding of the factors that influenced Astartes' morale under extreme stress, providing valuable intelligence about loyalist vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future operations. The Word Bearers had emerged from the Massacre with their ideological framework validated by success, their corrupted theology providing justification for the systematic slaughter of former brothers. The 17th Legion's chaplains had demonstrated their ability to maintain unit morale during morally challenging operations, their rituals and ceremonies creating bonds of loyalty that transcended traditional military discipline. The success of their ideological warfare had provided a template for corrupting other Imperial institutions through similar methods. The Iron Warriors had proven their value as siege specialists and artillery experts, their systematic approach to eliminating loyalist positions demonstrating the tactical expertise that had made them feared throughout the Great Crusade. The 4th Legion's coordination of the Massacre had required complex logistical planning and precise timing, skills that would prove invaluable for future operations against fortified Imperial positions. The success of their betrayal had validated Perdurabo's strategic thinking while earning him a position of trust within Horus's inner circle. The long road to recovery for the surviving loyalist legions would require not only rebuilding their military strength, but also addressing the psychological trauma inflicted by the betrayal. The Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard faced the challenge of maintaining unit cohesion while integrating new recruits who had not experienced the bonds of brotherhood that had once united the Space Marine legions. The institutional knowledge lost during the Massacre could not be easily replaced, forcing these legions to develop new tactical doctrines and operational procedures. The scattered nature of the survivors created additional challenges for coordination and mutual support. Individual companies and squads found themselves isolated in hostile territory, forced to operate independently while attempting to re-establish contact with their parent legions. The loss of communication networks and command structures had eliminated the coordination capabilities that had made the Space Marine legions effective as strategic assets, reducing them to tactical units capable of local operations, but unable to influence the broader course of the Civil War. The Isstvan Five massacre had demonstrated the fragility of the bonds that held the Imperium together, revealing how quickly loyalty could be corrupted and brotherhood transformed into enmity. The systematic nature of the betrayal had shown that even the most trusted institutions could be subverted, creating a climate of suspicion that would plague the Imperium for millennia to come. The psychological impact of the massacre would influence imperial culture and military doctrine long after the Horus Heresy had ended, creating institutional paranoia that would shape the development of the Imperium throughout the ages. As the fires of Isstvan Five finally died and the last echoes of battle faded into silence, the galaxy stood transformed by the magnitude of the betrayal that had unfolded in the Urgal Depression. The Horus Heresy had entered its darkest phase, with the forces of chaos ascendant and the Imperium's survival hanging by the slenderest of threads. The road to Terra lay open before the Warmaster's forces, while the Emperor faced the grim reality that his grand design for humanity's future had been shattered by the treachery of his most trusted sons. The legacy of Isstvan Five would endure as a testament to the ultimate consequences of betrayal, a wound in the heart of the Imperium that would never fully heal.